that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's home to me, and I walk alone. I walk this empty street on the boulevard of broken dreams, where the city sleeps and I'm the only one, and I walk alone. I walk alone, I walk alone. I walk alone, I walk up. My shadow's only one that walks beside me. My shallow heart's the only thing that's beating. Sometimes I wish someone out there will find me. Till then I walk alone. I'm walking down the line that divides me somewhere in my mind, on the borderline of the edge and where I walk alone. Read between the lines what's fucked up and everything's alright. Check my vital signs and know I'm still alive, and I walk alone. I walk alone, I walk alone. I walk alone, I walk up. My shadow's only one that walks beside me. My shallow heart's the only thing that's beating. Sometimes I wish someone up there will find me. Till then I walk alone. I walk alone, I walk up. I walk this empty street on the boulevard of broken dreams, where the city sleeps and I'm the only one, and I walk up. My shadow's only one that walks beside me. My shallow heart's the only thing that's beating. Sometimes I wish someone out there will find me. Till then I walk alone.
G'day legends, and welcome to the 3-hour extravaganza of why I was absolutely correct and justified in picking Steve Erceg. I know, you might be thinking after some of the MMA community, including some of the judges, which, let's face it, it was rigged. Some of the MMA community and some of the judges think that the fight went to Brandon Moreno. So maybe I would spend the next 3 hours going over the fight and explaining to you why I got that pick wrong. Why perhaps I was so confident going into that fight. But no, that's not what we're going to be doing today at all. What we're going to be doing is breaking down statistically why I was right to make that pick, why it isn't coping to make that pick, how that fight was rigged, how according to the rules of MMA, Steve Erceg technically won that fight, how we are going to rally a movement right now during this 3-hour video to get people together to look at that fight and actually start pushing the Mexican Commission to do something about the terrible, terrible judging that went down there. Jeez, how long did that intro go for? About a minute? Oh, God. Well, let's fix the red light first. Okay, now, this we're going to do a bloody deep dive, okay? We're going to do a bloody deep dive here, all the way from the beginning. All the way from looking at the stats of the fight. We're probably going to go back and watch the fight itself over the next 3.5 hours. We'll then look at some fan reactions. Am I recapping the start again just to pad? Yeah. Yeah, you bet I am. And I'm absolutely not editing this. So let's get right into it. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. First of all, I'd like to draw your attention, ladies and gentlemen, but mainly gentlemen, to the actual stats of the fight. Okay, the stats of the fight are what is very, very interesting here. Here is the, let's fix up the screen. That'll take some time. Hang on. Yeah, there we go. Let's fix up the screen a little bit. Yeah, see, we're gonna do a video. Do it properly. Take your time to do it properly. Put everything where it needs to be. I did pre-plan this stuff. I could have, to waste time, actually not even had this window open. I could have, gone to UFCstats.com, brought it up, done all my OBS settings, but I didn't do that. I didn't do that at all. I had everything ready to go because I want this video, yes, it's going to be 3.5 hours, but I want it to be fast-paced, hard-hitting, hard to describe, like where is he padding and where are we actually getting hard information. You won't be able to tell because I had everything ready to go in the back end. I didn't want to waste any time. I wanted to get straight into it. I'm not going to make some long, drawn-out video with some hugely overextended musical intro with lots of separate B cuts in it to make it seem like it goes on longer than it is. I'm not going to do that at all. I'm going to get straight into it. By the end of the video, you will be 100% assured that Steve Erceg won that fight. Because it's just going to be hard-hitting facts. It's going to be hard-hitting facts for 3 hours straight. Now, first of all, look at the significant strikes. I'll draw your eyes to the significant strikes right here, right? Fighter Brandon Moreno, significant strikes, 176 attempted, only got 89. Only got 89, landed 50% of them. Whereas Steve Erceg threw 279 significant strikes and landed 166. I mean, that alone, where's me water? I thought I had, I'm gonna need water throughout this entire experience. Boys, listen. We're only 4 minutes into this, okay? It's gonna be, get hydrated, okay? Get excited, okay? Get elevated, get exaggerated, get impregnated, because I'm about to hit you with all of the stats right here. Steve Erceg landed more significant strikes. Now, if MMA is damage-based scoring, and I would suggest to you that it is damage-based scoring, then just off the stat count alone, Steve Erceg should have won this fight. And you know what? I'm not doing this just to piss fart around and waste time. I'm not doing it that way at all. But I do think it is important that if we're going to talk about the rules of MMA, we might as well bring up the scoring criteria of MMA. Okay? And it doesn't matter how long it's going to take. We're going to do this properly. That's what we're going to do. Now, the scoring criteria of MMA, there's this... No, we don't want to go DAZN. The DAZN. Here we go. Let us... All right, now, which screen am I on? That one? Beautiful. Studio mode off. All right. The scoring criteria of MMA: effective striking and or grappling, legal blows that have an immediate or cumulative impact with the potential to contribute towards the end of the match, with the immediate weighing in more heavily than the cumulative impact. Now, just that alone, that one sentence there alone, when you pair it with the fact that Steve Erceg landed more of the significant strikes, you would have to be... Oh, this video is not getting monetized. There is going to be a music video at the start of this. It'd be lucky for this entire video not to get... I could just try and get the video copyright struck. And then, but no, I'd still have to make the video, and then no one would see it. That's dumb. I should try and make sure the video doesn't get copyrighted. Back to the fight stats. Right. What was I saying? What was I saying before? Right, anyone with half a brain that can read the rules must just look at the strike stats alone and know that Steven Erceg landed most of the significant strikes. Moving on to the second stat here, head strikes, all right? Getting some head from Steven Erceg. Steven Erceg was giving head to Brandon. Steven Erceg was hitting Brandon Moreno hard in the head with his fist. 90 significant strikes to the head. 90. Whereas Brandon Moreno, what did he land? 59. And when we go back and look at the fight, when we really break this fight down and we go over it frame by frame by frame, and we will. We've got nothing better to do. When we go back over this fight frame by frame by frame, you will see that there's a lot of this. There's a lot of this from Brandon Moreno. He's doing a lot of this. You know? Here. But he's not, where is it landing? It's landing bloody nowhere. And then when he is actually aiming for Erceg, he's just throwing big old meaty hooks. There's a spider in here. I'm not padding. There is a spider. There's a spider right there. We can't have that in Australia. Hang on 1 second, boys. This is actually not a bit. There is legit a spider right there by the window. No, we're not having that. Yep, die, you fucking dog. That's it. Go on with you. Get out of here. I mean, I'll take the excuse to buff up the video, but there is a spider in here. What was I saying? What was I saying? Oh yeah, when Brandon Moreno was throwing big old meaty hooks, how many of them were actually landing? In legitimacy, how many of them were actually landing? Not that many, if any. P. Diddy. Usher? Not that many, if any. Lil Wayne? I don't know. Too old. Don't remember. But the point is, Erceg was the one landing the significant strikes. Again, going back over here to the fight stats. And it wasn't just significant strikes to the body. Like, okay, Moreno could jab him up to the body a little bit. No. With significant strikes to the head. And that counts for something. Leg kicks. Again, Steven Erceg is just pacing him up in the leg kicks. At distance, at range, Steven Erceg, once again, 87 out of 174 to 115 to 270. Just phenomenal. This can't be correct because there's more. You know, I've never actually sat down and broken down the significant strike. Like, this can't be a total. This has to be strikes at range. How can he land more? So it's significant strikes and then head strikes and then body strike. But what? So I wonder what they count. Who cares? Anyway, the point is Steven Erceg landed more strikes. Now, round by round, Steven Erceg absolutely ran away with it. Look at that. Look right here. Look at this right here. Round 1, Steven Erceg ran away with it. Round 2, Steven Erceg ran away with it. Round 3, Steven Erceg ran away with it again. Round 4, Steven Erceg ran away with it again. And then round 5, yeah, okay. All right, Brandon Moreno might have gotten a takedown at the end of the round, but it's very obvious here. Some people thought that I was just joking around or being hyperbolic, being ridiculous when it came to my in-fight commentary while I was watching it live. But no, I wasn't. I always call it 100% how I see it going down in the fight. I try and look at a fight as unbiasedly as possible. And if I see a heavy leg kick land, I'm going to say, geez, that was a heavy leg kick that landed. And if I see a big meaty overhook from Brandon Moreno miss, I'm going to say, man, he's whiffing on those shots. And while I was watching the fight live, every single time I was 100% correct. I was 100% correct, and the stats go to prove that. The stats go to prove, you don't even need to watch the fight back. In fact, I encourage you not to. Let me watch the fight back for you and then show you it throughout this video. But when you do watch the fight back, there is nothing, these are the stats, they reflect the fight absolutely perfectly. How long did talking through the stats get me? 10 minutes, and I killed a spider during it. Oh, Jesus Christ, this is gonna go it's gonna be a long night, boys. I tell you what, buckle in, buckle up. It's gonna be, maybe should we do the Green Day song again? Every 15 minutes, we'll do the Green Day song to get through this. What are we gonna do next? Should we watch the fight? I thought it would honestly take longer to go through the stat. Let's watch the fight. All right, now, I can't actually show you guys the entire fight here on Fight Pass, which you would think is going to make this tricky. but it isn't. It is instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch the fight here on this screen, and I'm going to give my thoughts and my commentary on the fight. And then when I see something interesting or I notice a moment where I could see that Steve Erceg is very clearly winning the fight, then I will just pause it and and break it down. Like for instance, for this one, right? Here you can see Steve Erceg walking out, and there is nothing to see here except absolute confidence. There he is, looking confident, looking ready to go. Maybe if we slow it right down, we might get away with it. But look at that. That is the eyes of a killer. He has got hunter eyes right now. Now, I will say, and I'm just noticing now, and this definitely isn't coping, he is looking a little bit more malnourished than usual. I'm not going to lie. He's actually, now that I'm really looking deeply at him, he does look a little bit more, I don't know, thin in the jaw. This might be what, if there was going to be something that would sway the judges on his walkout, it might be the fact that he is looking just a little bit thinner in the jaw there. He does look a little bit, I think we're going to have to go back and see whether or not he had a bad weight cut. I'm not sure if he did, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did have a bad weight cut, because I'm not, while his eyes right here, they look locked in. They look like a hunter walking down to the cage, ready to just destroy his opponent. But the body and the rig, look at the arm, look at the right arm here. Just look at the right arm. It is giving a little bit malnourished. I don't like the way that it's dinting in there at all. So maybe there was a bit of an issue with the weight cut. We'll look into that as the video goes on. I don't know if there was, but as you can see, with the walkout alone, he is walking out just ready to kill. Absolutely ready to kill. Let's speed things up a little bit, move into the fight a little. Let's look at Brandon Moreno's walkout. Here he is. No, that's Erceg getting back into the cage, looking great. Look, I mean, this is definitely, geez, maybe he wasn't 100%. I mean, look at that there. Look at the rig. Just look at the rig there. It looks, where's the muscle definition? You know what it's reminding me of? It's reminding me of Alexander Volkanovski when he fought Islam Makhachev for their second fight. When Alexander Volkanovski, he had to cut a phenomenal amount of weight in 11 days' time. Now, Volk, you might not know this, but Volk, he was on the couch for that. He had had forearm surgery, wrist surgery, and he was on the couch and he was actually drinking every day, something that he doesn't often do. But, you know, Charles Oliveira, he was too scared to fight Islam Makhachev in the rematch, so he injured himself in sparring by getting a cut above his eye. The UFC called Volk. Volk said, no worries. Put a little bit of salt on it, a little bit of pepper on it, and you're done. I'll be there, no problem, Dana. I'll get down there right away, mate. So Volk decided that he was going to step up on 11 days' notice. But if you look at Volk's actual physique between fight 1 and fight 2, he looks a lot softer, a lot flabbier, because it was such a harsh weight cut. And I do believe that Steve Erceg had to take this fight on short notice. You know, he did have to take this fight on short notice, and not only that, but a lot of people in Mexico City were going in from food poisoning. So again, just look at Steve Erceg's rig here. Look at his body here. It doesn't look as shredded as it usually does. Let's see if we can find a better, yeah, look at the flat, yeah, that's perfect. I've landed on that absolutely perfectly. Usually Steve Erceg looks like a chiseled warlord, and he's definitely looking a little bit more Jorge Masvidal here. Definitely not the way that we want to be seeing him. In fact, I think if we can bring up images of Volk at his first fight with Islam. Let's have a look at when was the first Volk Islam? Volk versus Islam fight 1. When was this? When was it? This was at UFC 284. So let's have a look at Volk UFC 284 weigh-in. Yeah, let's just have a look at how he looks there. Images. Yeah, no, that's Makhachev. Yeah, look at Volk is absolutely looking just shredded here. Absolutely beautiful. No, don't care about all that. No, don't want to subscribe to your silly website, mate. This is something to see here. This is definitely not padding. Look at that. The abs, the muscle definition, just looking shredded, absolutely ready to go. Beautiful stuff. That is Volk ready to step up and win a world title. But unfortunately, Volk Islam 2. Volk Islam 2, when was that? When was Volk? UFC 294. Okay, Volk. UFC 294. Images. Yeah. Completely different, mate. Completely different. This is Alexander Volkanovski ready for UFC. This is him in 11 days, mate. Look at this. Look at this. That's Volk on 11 days. That's Volk on 11 days. Just malnourished. Looks like he wants to die. This is not cooking with Volk. This Volk is not cooking up anything. This Volk isn't cooking up anything at all. And I think that is very similar to the rig that we were seeing coming in with Steve Erceg. In fact, I would also say that when you go and put all of the evidence together with the fact that other fighters were suffering, with the food poisoning at UFC Mexico, we can actually start to put together a bit of a, what would you call it? A timeline of events. Yes. Events of how Steve Erceg lost, right? And number one, okay, this is going to be our main evidence board here for putting together how did Steve Erceg lose this fight. Number one, there must have been absolute corruption in the judging because he didn't lose in the judging because he technically won on the scorecards. So we'll go over here. We'll go. Not he won on the scorecard. He won on the strikes. We don't need the number one anymore, Dougie. He won on strikes. I think there's an E in there somewhere. ST Rikes. Definitely not a double T. You know what? We're going to make sure the spelling... We're not going to make sure this, but fuck the spelling. Who cares? That is... You know what? I'm not going to pad so much. I'm going to make you guys sit through my spell checks. That is just mean. I wouldn't put you guys through that. So number one, corruption in the judging. He won on the strikes. Number two, looking at the way that he came into the cage and the way that everyone saw... I mean, look at Joe Pyfer. Has everyone seen Joe Pyfer's reaction today? Maybe we'll go and look at Joe Pyfer's reaction to the food in Mexico. But number two, dodgy weight cut. Maybe food poisoning. Food poisoning / dodgy weight cut. It's a possibility. We have seen the UFC mess with the Australians before. You know, they didn't want Volkanovski coming in fully powered up to beat Islam Makhachev, and they most certainly did not want Steve Erceg in Mexico fully powered up at 100% Ercels, ready to fight Brandon Moreno. So I think right there is something to look at in this fight. Very closely something to look at. I'm not sure if that is the regular Erceg physique that we have all come to know and love. Certainly not the Erceg physique we would be seeing if he was in Australia, especially in Perth. It's also very interesting, I think, that we might point out as well, that the UFC have now done a deal with Sydney. They've now done a deal with Sydney to move UFC fight nights from Perth to Sydney. Again, just another thing in the machine of the UFC proving that they are actually anti-Erceg. They are actually anti-Ercel. Absolutely. So maybe the UFC, we can put that again as a timeline of events of what went wrong. UFC being perhaps anti-Perth. Yes. Anti-Perth. Now, usually, I wouldn't care if someone was anti-Perth. Because quite frankly, I don't know how you could be pro-Perth. The place is the arsehole of the planet. I mean, Jesus Christ, there is quite literally nothing out there. Perth is a small city of about 100,000 people. It is just horrible. It is just horrible. But you start to see a very, very clear through line of the UFC being anti-Perth, anti-Erceg, anti-Australia, and they are stacking everything up against them. Also, look at JDM. Right now, the UFC are actually trying not to let JDM's entire team fly over to Canada. They're making JDM's team pay for their own way there. They are not paying for JDM's team there. So more evidence of being anti-Perth, anti-Oz, anti-Eureka Stockades. Yep. Which is Australian freedom. Yep. With JDM's team being sidelined. Yep, this is true. These are the facts. Anti-Oz, anti-Eureka Stockades, JDM's team being completely silent. This is true. This is true. In fact, I would say that is a fourth point, not even a third point. That is a whole other point to talk about. The UFC and their anti-Australian movement. Look at them forcing for Robert Whittaker. You know, You know, Robert Whittaker, UFC Saudi Arabia, no one wants to fight Khamzat Chimaev. No one wants to fight Khamzat Chimaev. And quite frankly, why should Robert Whittaker have fought Khamzat Chimaev? He shouldn't have. Robert Whittaker was like the number 1, number 2 ranked contender in the world. What had Khamzat Chimaev done at middleweight? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. What, he'd fought at middleweight once 5 years ago. So you go from fighting someone that isn't even ranked at middleweight to fighting all the way up to Robert Whittaker. So Robert Whittaker's like, yeah, no worries, mate. I'm Australian. I'll take Khamzat Chimaev. Nobody else around here will. Right? And then Khamzat Chimaev pulls out sick again, by the way. And Robert Whittaker's like, I don't care. Give me your next best guy. So they throw him another Dagestani. Robert Whittaker sleeps that Dagestani in a second. Lights out. See you later. Ikram Eliskerov, I believe it was, sleeps him. And then the UFC are like, you know what, Robert Whittaker? We're so happy that you took Ikram Eliskerov on short notice. How about you can fight Khamzat Chimaev again? While we just let Sean Strickland duck him. Why don't you fight Khamzat Chimaev again? It's actually disgusting the way that you look at the way the UFC treats the Australian audience, the Australian public, and the Australian MMA fighters. In fact, UFC 3, this whole video might actually go to prove. This 3-hour expose might just prove that the UFC is vehemently anti-Australian. Vehemently anti-Australian. Because not only that, but the latest pay-per-view that was in Australia was absolute dog shit as well. The card was absolute dog shit as well. So, yeah, number 5, Australian pay-per-views are dog shit. Australian pay-per-views are dog shit. They're absolutely dog. The last one was absolute dog shit. I don't know what Australia did to the UFC, but the UFC is very, very not happy with us. So, anyway, this is all important context to realize as we get into the actual fight itself. This is all going into this fight before this fight even happens. You see why you've got to take the time to actually slow everything down and break the fight down second by second, frame by frame. And as we do this, you will see why picking Steve Erceg was the right thing to do. It was the right call to make. And it's not the fact that Steve Erceg lost the fight, because when you look at the stats, Steve Erceg won the fight. It's about going into the fight, everything, the matrix of events that was culminating around the walk into the cage. That is what is going on here. That is absolutely what is going on here. You have got the corruption of the judging. They are clearly Mexican judges. He won on strikes. That is an undeniable fact of the matter. There's food poisoning going on everywhere. We had fighters during UFC Mexico, while they're in the middle of their fights. I think it was Lupi Godinez. Was it Lupi? You know what? Let's get the facts correct. Let's really slow things down. Let's really slow this down and make sure we got everything correct. We want to cross our I's and dot our T's, because we don't want to play around here at all and get anything wrong. We want to make sure we're getting everything as right as we possibly can. So UFC Mexico fight card. Who was on the card? Hang on a second. UFC Mexico fight card. Urcel Moreno. 2 days ago. Don't miss a thing on UFC. You know, it's quicker just to go to Tapology while UFC just loads up, just spinning wheels me. I bet I could type in UFC Fight Night Mexico, Tapology, and it would come up before this wheel stops spinning. In fact, I'm going to. UFC Fight Night Mexico, Tapology. UFC, fix your website. How is it quicker to use Tapology than your actual site? It's ridiculous. Right. What was her name? Lupi Godinez. Lupi Godinez was literally saying during her fight, between rounds 2 and 3, that she needed to shit herself. They opened up the fight card. With DC talking about how he refuses to drink a warm cup of soda. So he has been having everything with Mexican ice, and he was shitting all week long. Joe Pyfer went on an absolute verbal tirade against the Mexicans because of how sick the food made him. So I think it is very clear to see that what we have here is corruption in the judging when the strike count they absolutely prove that Steven Erceg won that fight. Absolutely, unequivocally. They prove that Steven Erceg won that fight. Then you have got potential food poisoning with everybody on the fight card getting at least something. Again, Lupi Gordinez is there to go and shit herself before the card. Then you've got the UFC being anti-Perth in general, with the UFC deciding that they are going to move everything over to Sydney rather than in Perth, when Perth is the one that was the first one to open their doors back up to the UFC after 2020. So that is going into the fight as well. Then you've got more evidence that they're anti-Perth and anti-Australia and anti-Eureka Stockades, and I'll tell you the story of the Eureka Stockades if you don't know it. We'll get into that as well as we get into some of the background of Steven Erceg as we break down the fight a little bit more here in this 3-hour expose. And once we get started on this 3-hour expose about why I was correct, you'll believe me. We haven't gotten started yet. This is all just setting up. This is setting up everything. We haven't got started yet. This isn't the beginning of the video. There was a little bit of an intro. There was a little bit of a warm-up. Now we're just setting the scene. We're setting the table. We're putting the cutlery out. You know, we're throwing the cloth on the dining room table. We're preheating the oven. We're just getting everything ready before we actually get into the 3-hour video. You'll know once we get into the 3-hour video. So anyway, where were we? Right, we're talking about JDM's team being sidelined as well. JDM's team being sidelined as well. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard about this. Well, you know what? Let's not beat around the bush here. Let's not just assume that you guys know what's going on, you know? I don't want to just start talking about some stories that you guys might not have heard of. Let's actually talk about JDM's team not being allowed to go over to Canada. It is an absolute disgrace, mate. It is an absolute disgrace. JDM, it's in the game. Right, JDM. Is JDM a car? What is a JD? Is JDM a... G'day? What's that? What's going on there? Oh, yeah? God bless her. JDM, hang on a second. Let's, we're going to do this. If we're going to do this properly, we're going to do this properly. How about JDM... team, no flights. How about that? Jack Della Maddalena, fun rate. Yep, here we go. Right over here. You can always trust Reddit. Jack Mel... can you see anything here? Can you... New to Reddit? No? Get that out of the way. Get that out. As long as you guys can't see what I've been clicking on Reddit. Yeah, beautiful. Jack Della Maddalena is fundraising to cover each team. Perth UFC fans, we have an amazing night planned for our local legend, Jack Della Maddalena. Jack will be fighting for the UFC Welterweight Championship in Montreal on the 10th of May. And RGB is having a fundraiser dinner on Monday the 14th of April for each team. There will be a Q&A session with a long-time coach, Ben Vickers, gets in her knickers, and the brother Josh Della. Also UFC stars Steven Erceg and Quillan Salcarl. The tickets will be $150 and $250 for the VIP experience. Limited ticket event. Yep. Now this is because JDM has to pay for his own coaches and his own staff to go and actually fight in Canada. The same thing they did, the exact same thing they did to Petr Yan. It shows that the UFC is anti-Australian, it is anti-Perth, and the fact that they did it to Petr Yan as well, back in Fight Night of Abu Dhabi, it shows that they're anti-Orthodox as well. Anti-Orthodox as well. It is disgusting. It is disgusting. JDM's fundraising, yeah, look, we've found more evidence. We've found even more evidence. It's kind of infuriating. Hang on a second. 1 second, boys. We're going to make sure we do it properly. Boom! JDM is fundraising money so his whole team could go on his fight. Believe it or not, the UFC do not pay for anyone or anything but 6 nights accommodation for 2. I bet they would do it for Khabib's team. How come Nate Diaz's crew is 1,000 deep when they roll around? You ever see Nate Diaz walk around with just 2 blokes? You ever see Nate Diaz with just 2 blokes? It's like the UFC are quite happy to pay for all of Nate Diaz's staff, all of Nate Diaz's boys to rock around with their sunglasses on, and they just follow Nate Diaz around with an endless supply of fucking water bottles so we can launch him at people. The UFC is ready for Nate Diaz to do what they need to do, but when it comes to poor old JDM, no. JDM's got to pay his own way. He's got to pay his own way. It's disgusting. So, this all adds to the fact that the UFC is anti-Perth anti-Australian, anti-Eureka Stockades. And then of course, lastly, before we actually go into the fight itself, before we even start the video and begin to break it down, they are they're anti-Australian with the pay-per-views as well. The pay-per-views are absolutely dog shit. Right, so now that we've set all that up, I think it's time that we can actually start the video and get into the fight about why it was the right pick to make, to go for Steve Erceg, okay? Now, the very first thing here to look at, all right, is just, I want to draw your guys' attention. I want to draw your guys' attention to what is going on here with how they are just setting up the intro for Brandon Moreno. And what I find very, very interesting about the way that Brandon Moreno walks into the cage is you could tell, you can see that there is fear in his eyes. He knows that he is going to lose this fight with Steve Erceg. He can feel it in his bones. You see the way that he looks at his team. You see the way that he hugs his team. And he can smell fear in the air. We all can. We all absolutely. In fact, one thing that is going on that is very, very interesting, very, very interesting, is where is the fight? What happened to the fight? Where is the fight? Hang on a sec. Sorry, my computer just crashed and I just lost 20 minutes of doing this, so I'm super happy about that. Right, where are we at? Right, where's the actual fight? Here's the fight. Check this out. What's he doing there? What's Brandon Moreno doing there, I wonder? I'll tell you what he's doing there. He's pointing to the judges. He's pointing to the judges and he's saying to them, make sure that first round is already written down. Make sure the scorecards are already written down. Because again, when you look at the stats, Steven Erceg's best round was arguably round one. Steven Erceg's best round was arguably round one. And that's why round one should have gone to Steven Erceg, because of the amount of significant strikes that he landed. And we're going to look at these strikes and we're going to break them down bit by bit. We're going to prove why Steven Erceg was the rightful winner of this fight when you actually look at each single one bit by bit. And here he is pointing at the referee saying, you better bloody make sure that that first round is already in the books, mate, because I'm going to be a Mexican champion again. So he does that, and then I'd love to show you more of the fight, but the UFC is very, very controlling over what you can actually see, so I've just got to show you little clips. But then he goes and he gives these coaches a hug after he's done abusing the judges. He goes and gives these coaches a hug, and what you can see here, you tell me what you see there. You tell me, write it in the chat right now. You know, about, where are we at? We're maybe a little half an hour into the video before we actually start the video. We're into the half-hour stretch of getting things ready. What do you see here? That's right. That's right, you see fear. You see fear. That is the look of a man that is worried. He's scared. He's cack and dax, as we like to say in Australia. He knows that he is about to go in there against a monster. An absolute monster of Australian MMA that is going to eat him up and chew him out. So he is there, he is giving his coaches one last hug before he goes into the cage and gets destroyed. This is very similar to the look that Islam Makhachev had on his face after the Alexander Volkanovski fight. Very, very similar. Where Islam Makhachev knew that he was going to be losing that fight on the judges' scorecards. He knew it, and he had fear on his face. Once again, a fighter is in a cage fight with an Australian man, and there is just clear fear and anxiety on his face. Now, the next thing that I want to break down here in detail is actually how much grease was on Brandon Moreno. Again, look at the bloke that is doing the cut man, that is greasing up Brandon Moreno. Now, I don't know about you, like, I don't want to get too, pigmentationally here. I don't want to get too Israel Adesanya talking to Dricus du Plessis. But I've got a feeling that this bloke has got a Spanish-Mexican background. There's something about me that says that this bloke has got a Mexican background. And look how much grease is on his fist right now as he starts greasing up Brandon Moreno. You are not going to believe, by the time this is done, how much is actually left on this guy's hand. There's barely any. There's barely any at all, because he is lathering up Brandon Moreno. As he's greasing up, he's getting a little bit on the cheek, a little bit on the neck. He's cleaning Brandon Moreno up. Like, look at this swipe here. Look at this swipe here. The fist is completely turned over. The grease is now on Brandon Moreno's shoulder as it's coming off the edge of the hand. And then he goes to wipe it off, and he wipes it down and across Brandon Moreno's chest. Down, and you see, look at that. And again, the cameraman is hiding what is going on behind there so that we, the audience, can't see how this is actually getting broken down so intricately. We, the audience, are locked into this matrix of perception with what is going on here, because you've got the forearm in front of the guy. You know what? I need some background tunes. Sorry, like I said, my computer just completely reset on me, so I don't have anything ready to go. But I had some background tunes playing to just get me in the zone here a little bit, and I need that because what I'm going to look at here is really detail-oriented and specific. So it's good to have a bit of background tunes going on. Now we got the background tunes happening. So the cameraman, he's blocked the hand. The cutman, full of Vaseline, turned it inward so we can't see it, and now he's gonna across the chest to Brandon Moreno. Look at this. Just look at this. I want you to just turn off your biases. All right, this is what I try and do. This is what I try and do when I do prediction videos and I break down fights like this. Turn off your blinkers, turn off your biases, and just try and lock in on the finer details, okay? Like an autist. Okay, now so watch the way that he just does that. Did you see that? Hides the hand and completely greases him up. And then just loads him up. Again, I'd love to show you the screen, but the UFC, very, very controlling, like I've heard Brandon Moreno is, actually. People don't want to talk about this, but apparently he is very difficult to work with at the Mexican PI. He's a very, very controlling young man. You think Dana White and the UFC are bad? Nothing compared to Brandon Moreno, which is probably why he was having a go at the judges before the fight even started. I mean, when have you ever seen a fighter specifically point to the judges like that and start telling them which way they should start judging things before the scorecards start? Never. And now you see him here getting absolutely greased up to holy hell. I mean, look at the amount that they are just shoveling onto him. I'd love to show you, but they are pouring it onto him. And then when this whole endeavor is done, look at this now. Now that he's had a good old rub everywhere, over the chest, over the forearms, everything. Look how much is left on his hand. He came in lathered up, mate. Absolutely lathered up. But now there's not a drop on him. Not a drop. Unbloody believable, that is. So I think I hate to do this. I hate to be the one to do this and to point this out, but I think point number 6. I think we're dealing with a greased up Mexican. I know this can sound some type of way. Again, I don't want to bring in the idea of Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis, but I think when we're looking at this fight of Steve Erceg versus Brandon Moreno, I think we have to think about whether or not we have got a greased up Mexican in there, because I believe we can smell a greased up Mexican. The amount of just the Vaseline that has been poured onto I mean, he's glistening now. He's absolutely glistening. So we can now get into the fight starting. And with the cameraman and the work that the cameraman does in this fight, wait till you have a look at wait till you see what we're going to be seeing in this fight. So the first thing that I want to point out, guys, is obviously the significant strikes in the fight. The significant fights all go to Steve Erceg, all of them. And this is the reason that they gave it to Brandon Moreno is because they were able to convince you, the audience, that what you were seeing with your eyes wasn't right at all. And what they were doing is Brandon Moreno, he's throwing shit out in this direction, but he's also throwing big meaty hooks. But the big meaty hooks, they're not landing. They're not landing at all. Like, firstly, this is a Brandon Moreno jab that they're saying is landing so well. Look at this. Where is he? Look at the space. Look at the space. Just take a look at that. I mean, even with Brandon Moreno pointing out his finger there, like Brandon Moreno has got his entire finger out right there, the whole thing out. And even with him having the whole finger out right there, it's still not even close. And this is one of those moves that Brandon Moreno is doing where he's trying to confuse Erceg. But unfortunately for him, Erceg is operating on a higher level than any of us can even comprehend, which is why picking Steven Erceg was the right move. So Brandon Moreno, he's throwing shit all over the place, and then he goes to throw these big meaty hooks, which we're going to get to. I'm just waiting for the correct frame to pull up. I did have this all segmented out, but my computer died on me. But we're here, we're back now, and we're going to make sure that we do this properly. We're going to do this right. We're not going to waste any time piss farting around. We're going to cross our I's, dot our T's, cross our X's. We're going to make sure we do the Q with the loop and put our little Q on it like that. This is going to be perfect here. Now, this is a big meaty hook from Brandon Moreno, a big old meaty hook from Brandon Moreno, and I just want you to just look. How is that even touching Erceg? It whiffs it. It doesn't touch him at all. It barely grazes his nose. Barely grazes his nose. And how is this a significant strike at all? How is this even counted as one of the significant strikes? I mean, if this was the Weasel would be laughing at trying to hand this in. But this is what the judges and the commentary and the MMA community and everyone is trying to tell you is one of the big shots that Brandon Moreno landed. One of the big overhands that Brandon Moreno landed. But it didn't even land at all. And then wait till you see some of the other stuff that we get into. It's going to be brutal, mate. Just brutal. When you see these body kicks that Brandon Moreno was landing, none of them were landing. None of them were landing at all. They're hitting the elbow of Erceg. Erceg's getting his body out of the way. Some of the other hooks are just hitting the guard of Erceg. It's honestly, it's disgusting. It's disgusting what the commentary team was trying to sell to us as Brandon Moreno in his dominance. So I think you've probably got the UFC biased working against Erceg as well, which is just, it's such an uphill battle for Erceg, which is why picking Steve Erceg was the right call to make. It was the smart call to make. It was the brave call to make. When 84% of the community are picking Brandon Moreno, it's because they're falling into the mental trap. They're falling into the mind games that the UFC wants you to fall into. You're looking at UFC Mexico, you're looking at UFC Noche, and you're trying to do what the UFC wants you to do. When you got to learn to think for yourself, you know? Again, turn the blinkers off. Stop thinking in a binary method and think about who's actually going to win the fight when it comes down to the skill set, which is why Erceg landed more. I mean, we're going to look at another big old meaty hook from Brandon Moreno here, and you'll see that it lands. Flush on the guard of Erceg. Look at this. Erceg's right arm is already raised as Brandon Moreno's big meaty left hook comes in for a swing. Look at that. Another perfect block by Steve Erceg. Not even bloody close to landing, that one is. Not even close. All Brandon Moreno was doing for the entire fight was just touching up the guard of Steve Erceg. Oh, geez, Steve Erceg's forearms must be sore today. I guess that's why we can't give him the fight. Because there's a moment here that I want you guys to have a look at. There's a moment here. It's one of the body shots as well. And it's just disgusting. Honestly, it's disgusting. It's disgusting what they say lands here. Doesn't land at all. Right, so here we go. Here it comes now. It's loading up now. Here we go. Right. And look at that. Where's Stephen Erceg's arm? Where is Stephen Erceg's forearm? I ask you this. Where is Stephen Erceg's forearm? It's there. It's landing, boom, right there. Now, you could say that maybe because the camera is a little bit high and a little bit tilted down, that maybe this foot is coming up underneath Stephen Erceg's elbow and landing on the body. No, I don't. I plainly, flatly do not accept that. Erceg blocked this. This is another perfectly blocked shot from Stephen Erceg. Let me have some water. I need to hydrate because this is a downright robbery. And the camera work that's happening here as well is disgusting. Because if they had actually had, no, I won't have my drink. I'm on a roll here. If they had the camera actually set up properly, so rather than looking down the barrel of Brandon Moreno, rather than looking down the back of him, down the barrel of him, and tilted slightly down, so it looks like his kicks are coming up underneath, right? Rather than his kicks looking like they're coming up underneath. If we had taken the camera, instead of down the barrel, if we had turned it like a Matrix bullet time, we'd see it side on and we would see that the foot is landing clearly on the elbow. But that's not what we're doing at all. Instead, you've got this biased camera work, absolutely disgusting, from the team over there in Mexico. And I think it's something that needs to be questioned as well, you know? I think it's something that needs to be questioned as well, because you've got the UFC PI in Mexico. Have a look at this, look at this jab. Look at this hook. This is another one. Another hook. It doesn't land. Erceg's bloody blocking everything, mate. He's blocking everything. This is another one of those things that we could just... I mean, you got the corruption of the judging. Who won it on the strikes? The corruption of the judging. You've got the food poisoning, which definitely led to a dodgy weight cut of Erceg. He didn't look good at all coming into it because he was fighting the uphill battle of the weight cut. You've got the UFC being anti-Perth, anti-Australia. Australian pay-per-views are dog shit. You've got a greasy Mexican. We've just saw that. And I think... dodgy cameraman. Dodgy camera, a Mexican cameraman. Dodgy cameraman. Think about it, right? You've got the UFC PI in Mexico. Yeah, the UFC sphere, right? Set up for Mexico. I don't see UFC Australia like putting on a UFC fight at the Great Sydney Opera House. Why don't we set up a cage in front of the Opera House? And instead of having the sphere, have the UFC Opera House. No, we don't have that. We've got Brandon Moreno in his custom shorts. Did Erceg get any custom shorts? No, he did not. I mean, the UFC have just set up everything they can to go against him. And it's just, I mean, it's an uphill battle, you know? And this is, I mean, maybe picking Erceg was the wrong call. Maybe it was the wrong call, because there's so much to get uphill here. And it's not fucking fair at all. It's just not fucking fair at all, you know? What they do to the Aussies, they fucking dog Robert Whittaker, they fucking dog Volkanovski, and they just do this to Erceg. I mean, the fucking score stats are as clear as day, cunt. They're as clear as fucking day. And then you just want him to go, you want him to be good, you know? You fucking want him to do their best, mate. You want him to go and have a real red hot crack and do their best and put the best foot forward, and they get fucking greasy Mexican. They grease him up. They got dodgy cameramen. I don't know, mate. I just don't know. Maybe it's me. You know, maybe it's me. Maybe I made the wrong fucking call here. Maybe I should see what's coming up. You know, when they have Islam Makhachev versus Justin Gaethje. I don't know, boys. It takes someone to step up and admit when they were wrong. When they were wrong about making a pick. I mean, everyone was picking Brandon Moreno. Everyone. I think Guru was. Lucas Tracy was. You know. Maybe Fight Fairy was. I don't know. I don't even know if Fight Fairy still makes videos. You know. I don't know. I don't understand. I mean, Fight Night with Frankie was. Antoine with Making the Walk was. Bloody crossover was. I mean, everyone was just picking. Bedtime. I assume bedtime. Poor bedtime. You know, Erceg himself. I don't know how he's recovering from this. It's a fucking mess. It is. It really is just a fucking mess. You know, and then you go and you look at the end of the fight. You look at the end of the fight and you can just see that Erceg they can hear the crowd is cheering against him. He can see where he's sitting. I mean, how often do you see this? Where the athlete's sitting, they've got a judge right there. They've got a judge right there, right behind his team. So his team know the fix is in. They know that he's winning every single round, but how often do you see a judge sitting just right there behind the team? It's just everything is going against him. Absolutely everything. And then the end of the fight happens, and Steve just looks crushed, mate. He looks crushed. He just looks devastated. Look, DC can't believe it. DC knew this is the face of the corporate MMA. Sorry, it's hard to get DC to fit on the screen because he's so fucking big. But this is the face of corporate MMA media, knowing that the UFC they've done Erceg wrong. DC knows it's bullshit. He can't fucking believe what has gone on. Brandon Moreno cannot believe that he's been given another robbery gifted decision. Herb Dean has got a look on his face that says, mate, this isn't right. This isn't right. You know, and they say a picture tells 1,000 words, and it really does. It might, in this case, it might even say 3,000 words. This picture might say another 2.5 hours of words. This one might. I mean, Brandon Moreno, speechless, and he should be. Again, I mean, I hate to keep bringing it up. I don't want to keep bringing it up, but speechless is Brandon Moreno that he's gotten the win, and he should be speechless. Herb Dean looks like he's going to need to go to Thailand and do some coaching over and do some reffing over at One Championship. He's going to need to just be fucking harassing ladyboys, because he knows that he has done something horrible here today at robbing a good man, a kind man, a godly man, a Steve Carell looking man. He knows that he knows that the fix is in and this is wrong. Erceg is seeing his entire fucking career slip away from him. You know, right now Boulevard of Broken Dreams is playing in his head. You know, I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. That's going through his head right now. You know, Boulevard of, I don't know where it goes, but it's only me and I walk alone. Man, I'm sure you've heard it. I'm sure you've heard the song. Maybe you haven't heard the song. Maybe you haven't. You know? In the city streets, on the boulevard of broken dreams. I'm probably going to get a copyright strike now. I might as well chuck the song in the video. You can definitely hear it coming, you know? And DC is feeling the exact same thing. DC is feeling the exact same thing. He's talking, he's over there. You can't see it because the screen's cut off, and I'd love to show you more, but, you know, it's the UFC. You just can't. But he's over there looking at Hunter Campbell and Dana White, and he's saying, we've done the wrong thing here. We've let a good man down. We've absolutely ruined a good man here. And this is the world that we live in now, you know? A picture tells 1,000 words, and this one absolutely does. Yeah, there's DC, barely. That suit is clinging on for life, just like, quite frankly, the UFC's integrity, just like Steve Erceg's career. Again, I hate to keep bringing it up, but since it's brought itself onto the screen, I didn't even want to do that. But it's inescapable. It's just absolutely inescapable. The fix was in, and my pick was right, and now, you know, innocent people, they have to suffer. They have to suffer because of this. Innocent people who are just there making their own MMA videos, you know, like, again, going into it, I made a video, and the reason this exists is because I made a video about how I believed that Steve Erceg would win this fight, dominate this fight. And I think, you know, that's something that I think now that you've seen the stats and I've brought up exactly why I believed that he would dominate it, I think that's why this video that I made here, let's bring it up. This video that I made here, the upcoming domination, Steve Erceg will absolutely destroy Brandon Moreno at UFC Mexico. I mean, you can see the fervor and the virality and the high levels of testosterone that are coming through the screen of this young man. With it, never had braces in my life, by the way. Just saying, never had braces in my life. And look at those chompers. Beautiful, straight, white, beautiful, clear chompers. The eyes of a hunter. Fresh haircut, looking great, you know? And just to give a little bit of background, you know, I don't want to make this entire video about me. But just to give a little bit of background here, I don't mind doing it. Hang on a sec. Let's just to give it, well, that's too much. Let's just. Now, you might not know these characters. That's very unflattering. Let's go back to the start. Oh, there we go. Hunter Eyes. What's Guru up to? What is Guru up to there? Let's move this. Now, you might not... What the fuck is going on? Hunter Eyes. There we are. This is an Inception here. Now, you might not know this, but this is what I call... Behind me is the wall of fighters that cannot afford to lose. And having JDM on there, having an Australian on there, I mean, I had Jack Jenkins on there. He's been shot down brutally by the UFC's corrupt systems. I've got Jack Jenkins on there, and we've already gone through how the UFC is already trying to set him back. I don't see the UFC doing any medical bills to try and fix his nose, none at all. But when I made this video, and just to give context to the full video, just to make sure that we understand what's going on, that is the wall of fighters that I cannot afford to see lose. And I should have put Steve Erceg on there. They're just, as you can see, I was running out of space on the wall. But you got Tom Aspinall, you've got Manel Cap, you've got Chad Puria with his beautiful Chad-looking nose, you've got Joaquin Buckley looking like an absolute monster, ready to eat Kamaru Usman. You've got Paddy Pimlich, I'm on the Paddy train, and then you've got Dricus du Plessis there as well, looking like an absolute Chad. So this video, I break down exactly why Steve Erceg is going to win. And look, I might have been a little bit, I don't know, overzealous at times, you know, when I was really cheering on why I thought he would win. I might have been a little bit, that's Ned Kelly, by the way. We'll get into how the Ned Kelly story affects the Stephen Erceg outcome of the fight as well. But look, I might have been a little bit overzealous with that fight. That's the Eureka Stockades. We'll get into how that history there also sets up what was going through Erceg's mind as he's getting into the cage. I might have been a little bit overzealous, you know, talking about how Erceg was going to win. But I think that if we didn't have everything going against us, I mean, the thing is, he did win, you know? He did win. And again, I hate to keep bringing it up. But he did win. Round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5. He technically won every single round of the fight. But what's really terrible about this, what is really, really terrible and disgusting about this, is that the whole endeavor of this page is to be, it's meant to be fun. You know, this entire page, it's meant to be an open, fun, fan community friendly page. And the disgusting NPC shills, I mean, this isn't a great example, but people hate bro, don't listen to them, keep it up. Thank you, Woods MMA. I appreciate it, mate. You know, you're few and far between. You are one of the 84% of people, you're one of the what's the opposite of 84%? 84% would be, then it would be, hang on, for 16%. You're one of the 16% of people. Let's not pretend here. Let's make sure that we get this 100% correct. You know, no, it is 16%. Let's back yourself, Doug. Back yourself, Dougie. Back yourself. Woods MMA. People hate bro. Don't listen to them. Keep it up. Thank you, mate. Thank you. I appreciate it. I need it. You are one of the 16% of people. That's an actual, you're a free thinker. You're a free thinker, mate. I bet in 2020, there was probably a little IQ test going around at the time. A little IQ test to see who was an actual smart person in the room. I bet you passed it, mate. I bet my bottom dollar you're one of the blokes that passed that little IQ test. And the 84% of people that were picking Brandon Moreno, I bet they've got 2, maybe a couple of boosters as well. Right. I don't know why you would have thought this. I love Astro Boy, but he lost to the guy Moreno beat. If not for Pantoja, he'd rule over the division. I'm glad that YouTube recommended this today. So this guy was laughing at me today. He was laughing at me today because I was brave enough to step up and have a take. You know, and I don't know if that was the wrong take. Maybe it was. Maybe it was. You know, maybe it was the correct call to make about the fight, but the wrong take to make about the culture. You know? I mean, if this is going to be a video about reflection, maybe I shouldn't be coping the entire time. You know, maybe it's about something more. Maybe it's about the culture of the UFC in general is wrong. You know, Stephen Erceg, he can go in there. He can fight a greased up Brandon Moreno in Mexico at elevation, land more of the significant strikes. Again, I don't want to keep bringing it up, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean, he can land more of the strikes, but maybe it's about the culture of the UFC and how they set up stars. And that really is something to think about. Maybe, I don't know. Let's pray on. We've got Device Journey here. He says this didn't age well. Well, I mean, I don't know. Did it? Did it not age well? I think in retrospect it kind of did. I said that Brandon Moreno but Steve Erceg, he was the better striker. He was the better wrestler. He had more heart. He had more savagery in him. And he did. And he fought all 25 minutes at elevation, Brandon Moreno, he lives at elevation. It's not hard for him to fight at elevation. It's not hard for him to fight when he's greased up and he's got everything going his way. It's not hard for him when his entire team is allowed to be there. I'm sure if they're not letting JDM's entire team be there for a title fight, they're definitely not letting Steve Erceg's entire team be there for a main event. So I don't know if I agree that this didn't age well. I think maybe it did. I don't. Again, if I did anything wrong with the picks, I picked against the culture of the UFC wrong. Not exactly, as Chael Sonnen would say, the kicks and the punches. I picked against the culture. Nexus 1909 says, you were saying? You were saying? You were saying? Fuckwit? What I was saying, fuckwit, was spot on here. Let's dive a little bit deeper into this. I know we don't have time for it and we've got to keep this moving, but let's dive into this. Robbed. Biased judges, Erceg 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, this is what I said. I woke up in a fucking... I hate to sidetrack, I hate to just throw us off the... you see there it says 21 hours ago. And I don't want to take us off topic here and take us on a bit of too much of a tangent here. But I was haunted last night. Haunted. I thought I would go to bed early. I'd wake up. I took the day off work because I was going to make this video. And I was going to break it down frame by frame and do this properly. But I was just haunted by visions of little Mexicans running around laughing at me like demons. Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell-esque. Bryce Mitchell is worried about the demons going in there against Jan Silva. Well, last night, Dougie was haunted by demons. I didn't have a wink of sleep last night. Maybe I did, maybe I don't know, my bed was covered in sweat. I was tossing, I was turning, I'd wake up, I'd feel like there was nacho sauce and cheese all over me. All over me. It felt like red hot peppers and salsa were being dripped into my eyes. Because I knew that the culture of the UFC had stolen a beautiful young man's opportunity at going for greatness and going for glory. And it tore me up inside. It really did, I woke up, there was already a cigarette in my mouth. It was lit. It was half smoked. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how it got there. I must have been sleep. I must have gotten up, I hope I got dressed. Maybe I didn't. I was still naked. I'm not going to lie to you. I was still naked when I woke up. So perhaps I got up. I went out of the house. I went down the street. I walked 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, maybe 4 blocks, 5 blocks. Could have walked 6 blocks. Perhaps I walked 7 blocks. I don't know. I obviously found a pack of smoked Subway. No stores are open around here at that time of the night. On a Sunday night, no stores are open around here. So in my mind, I'm being chased by demons covered in Mexican cheese sauce with their eyes bleeding with jalapeno peppers. I'm running around naked. I must have bumped into someone who had a smoke. And I've come back to the house. I've put myself back in bed, tucked myself in, lit the cigarette, had 1 puff, 2 puffs, maybe 3 puffs, perhaps 4. I'm just sorry. It's a lot to deal with, I'm going through the motions and so I didn't know, and I woke up in an absolute rage, in a stupor, furious. I woke up I was fuming. So I mean, again, I don't want to waste too much of our time here because we have a lot to get through in this video, and believe me, we've barely started. I'm not kidding. We have barely even scratched the surface of the list of things that I've got to cover in this video to prove why I was right in making the pick, but perhaps I was wrong with the way that the fight turned out, because I was wrong about making the pick in the sense of the general culture of the sport. If you get what I'm saying, if you can visualize what I'm saying here, I was right about the fight, and Steve Erceg beat him in the fight, and I promise this will be the last time that one of the last times that I bring up the stats. You know, one of the few last times that I bring up the stats, but I was right about Steve Erceg winning the kicks and the punches, but I might have been wrong about just the vibe. The vibe of the UFC right now. So, where was I? Where was I? I was replying to comments. I woke up from a horrible night's sleep, and I see abuse coming from the MMA community, and my heart breaks. My heart breaks because I know that Steve Erceg has been robbed, and I know that the MMA community are pissing themselves laughing, and I know that the world is full of NPC fuckwits, and people who pick Brandon Moreno were NPC fuckwits. Only the brave could stand up and pick Steven Erceg. So here I am, minding my own business in bed, trying to figure out where this cigarette came from, trying to figure out what the fuck is going on around here. And this bloke comes at me with, you were saying? So I just let him have it. I said, mate, it was a robbery. You know? I don't like to use that term often, robbery, because it brings up thoughts of violence and it puts negativity out into the world. And I'm not a negative bloke, generally. I'm a positive bloke. I like to put out positive words. I like my speech to be positive. Thoughts become things. Words become energy put out into the universe. So I don't usually like to say that, but I said to him, mate, it was a fucking robbery. I said it, and I hope he's watching this video right now, because I'd look him in the eye and I would say to him, mate, that's what it was. That's what it was. A fucking robbery. So, anyway, excuse my language. Anyway, so it was a robbery. Biased judges, Erceg, rounds 2, rounds 3, rounds 4. And then Mr. Brian, who is not invited to the conversation at all, goes, how is this a robbery? Super close fight, but Moreno on the foot wins that easily. Super close. Do I need to circle back around? Brian, do I need to circle back around and show you strike for strike again how Brandon Moreno is spazzing out like a special needs kid that dropped his Skittles and is trying to catch him? He's throwing shots all over the place, where Erceg is nice clean jabs down the center, nice low kicks, piecing him up, winning every single round. I don't know how you could say it was close at all. I don't know how you could say it was close at all. And again, I hate to do this. I hate to do it, and it will be one of the last times that I bring this up. What do you see there? What do you see there, Brian? So Brian comes in, just completely uninvited, molests the conversation with his presence, if you will, and I will. He molests the conversation with his presence, and says super close fight, but Moreno on the foot wins that easily. And here I decide, you know what? I'm gonna try and bring some levity into the world, and rather than abuse Brian because I've had a horrible night's sleep, I'm gonna try and be the bigger man. Be the bigger man and say, you know what, mate, well done. Well done. And then Mickled, what kind of a fucking name is Mickled, by the way? You want to come at me for having the guts to step up and say how I feel and put it out there on the internet. And this absolute flog of a bloke, Mickled, wants to come at me and say, be 3 days clean from crack before making a prediction. Now, I don't find that funny at all. I don't find laughing about people's addictions and problems funny at all, you know? These three letters, UFC, are represented by Disney. ESPN and Disney. Yeah, that is a family company now, right? That means we are one of the only sporting organizations in the world that actually step up and have men and women equally on the same cards. Yeah? We celebrate Pride Month here at the UFC, just like anybody else. You can have a rainbow-colored name on your shorts if you want. That's what this company is about. UFC. Poor Erceg. I'm sorry. I might break down during this video because it's just hard. So I'm sorry if I lose my composure during this video. But it's just hard, you know? And it's people like this, it's people like Mikkeld that make it so hard to keep my cool. Because you're here trying to make a good, wholesome, family-friendly channel and a wholesome, family-friendly company, Ultimate Fighting Championship, where people fight on for the right to tell their stories and to have a go inside the cage. And this is what makes this company owned and represented by Disney great. This is what makes it great. Because it's a family-first company. Remember Cowboy Cerrone? Can you remember Cow Dad? How he got extra power points because he became a dad, and then they would bring his kids into the octagon with him, and he would have his kids there in the front row, no matter how badly Cowboy Cerrone got his ass beaten, and his nose broken, and blood spewing from his face. Blood absolutely gushing out of his eyes. And look at the Cowboy Cerrone broken nose. Cowboy Cerrone broken nose. Now, some of you old news heads, like this Mikkeld flog is, might not remember this, but you boys are about to learn something today. So this can be Cowboy Donald Cerrone. And it's just this beautiful violence where it takes a minute to load up. Hang on, we'll get there. Listen, sorry to get sidetracked. Right. And his kids can be in the front row while this is happening to him because we are a family-first, Disney-owned company. And we encourage the fighters to have their kids there. Not only that, but we encourage the women to be on right after the men, unlike every other sport, you know? Every other sport segregates, but not the UFC. Not the UFC owned by Disney. You've got basketball, has women's basketball on separately. AFL has women's AFL on separately. NFL, they're the most sexist. They have lingerie NFL. Look, I mean, they are the most disgusting, sexist of the lot. I hate to bring this up. I'm sorry to bring this up, but I mean, they dress their women up in skimpy little. I mean, look at this down here. Look at this poor girl down here on the bottom left. Look at this poor girl. She must be freezing. She must be absolutely freezing playing in midwinter. Look at these women. Barely showing anything. I'm sorry. So other sports, you know, NFL, NBL, NHL, AFL, you know, soccer, the Olympics. Like how many? I mean, how look. Right, like in the Olympics, you know, you got the aquatics, the archery, the athletics, the badminton, the baseball, the beach volleyball, you know, the boxing, the kayaking, cycling, equestrian, fencing, field hockey, soccer, golf, gymnastics, handball, judo, lacrosse, and judo's not even a real sport. It's just tripping. Judo, the modern pentathlon. I mean, God would even. What is that? What is the modern pentathlon? What rowing? How is that a sport? That's just moving forward. Yeah, rugby, sailing, bloody shooting, mate. Skateboarding. That's not a sport. Kids do that. I mean, and how can skateboarding even be segregated? It's a kid's game. Because skateboarding, sport climbing, they had to put the word sport in it to try and trick you into thinking it's even a sport. Sport climbing. I mean, if you've got to put sport in the name of it, it's hardly a sport, is it? You either can tell it's a sport by looking at it, or it's not. Sport climbing. Unbelievable. Squash, which I assume is just stepping on fruit. Table tennis, taekwondo, tennis, which is just table tennis, but on a far bigger table, I assume, which is famously segregated. Just disgusting segregation there in tennis and table tennis as well, I would say. Taekwondo, which I think should be mixed. They should have that one as mixed. Again, we've done. I think we've done tennis, the triathlon, weightlifting, and wrestling, and these are all except for boxing. I think boxing was famously not segregated in 2024. But the point is, right? All these other sports have got the genders on completely separate events, but not the UFC. The UFC is so family first. You've got Donald Cerrone encouraged to bring his kids while he gets the shit beaten out of him. You've got the genders mixed up. It's owned by Disney. Go and see Snow White, hearing nothing but amazing things. So you've got that coming in as well, all from Disney. And what this shows is that we are part of a progressive, positive. I mean, Amanda Nunes, one of the greatest champions of all time, is a diehard lesbian. Hates cock. Fucking hates it. And the UFC celebrate her to no end at all. So not only that have we got women's, but we've got gays, we've got lesbians, we've got Pride Month, we've got the whole lot here at the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Champion, brought to you by Endeavor TKO, presented on ESPN. The UFC, company umbrella of TKO, by Endeavor, platformed by ESPN, overly platformed by Disney. And that is what we are putting out here. And that is the sport that we all together love and adore and try and sit down and talk about to no end. And then you've got people like this absolute fucking muppet, Mikel D, 2067, saying 3 days clean from crack before you make a prediction. I mean, does that seem like that is in line, that kind of thinking and that kind of rhetoric is in line with what we're trying to do here at the UFC? And again, it's just fucked, isn't it? It's just not right. It's not right to say things like that on a company like this. So, Mikel, fucking have a think about what you were saying to people. Because we've all gone through our own personal journeys with addiction. We've all tried to we've all tried to battle addiction, front and back and forward, side by side, together. We're all here just trying to support each other. And generally, this is a very, very supportive community. And what you've done there is disgusting, Mikel D. So, this reads like someone who isn't even an MMA fan. Honestly, this reads like someone that isn't even an MMA fan at all. This is probably just someone just scrolling the internet, looking for someone to laugh at. And he's landed on my channel, and he's seen someone who quite frankly is a Chad, looks like a Chad. He seems, look, I mean, look, yeah. I mean, I won't get copyright struck on my own video, but he's seen someone like this, who's confident, who's got a great jawline, you know, nice thick lips, you know, beautiful golden eyes, clean, thick, brown, beautiful locks, still at maybe 36-ish years old. Yeah, there's a few crow's feet, but you get that on the big jobs. And he's seeing someone that's passionate, putting their best self out there, and he goes, stop smoking crack. And you can tell Mikel D is coming from a place of deep, deep self-loathing and hatred. Because to look at someone like that and to want to have a go at them, no, that's just not the kind of company that we're trying to build here. So I told him to go and fuck himself nicely. But then I backtracked and I was like, no, Dougie, just because evil little Mexicans covered in cheese and jalapeno sauce were chasing you in your sleep doesn't mean that you need to have a go at them. So I immediately woke back up and I deleted it. I deleted it. I'm not afraid to admit it. I deleted it, and instead I just went with the laughs. I went with the laughs instead, because I thought that's just there's something that people don't really realize in life. Every situation that you've got two ways to look at it. You've got the positive, and you've got the negative. And I would always like to lean on the positive. Because when you do that, when you lean on the positive side of things, sorry, I keep getting bouts of emotions. This poor old Steve Erceg. I mean, he was just, I mean, I don't want to keep bringing it up, but a picture tells 1,000 words. And I think after a day like that, where you can tell the entire company is just disgusted with what they've done, I think it is important that when you sit down and you think about life and you think about the way that you can respond to people when they say disgusting things that aren't family friendly at all, you can look at the positive or you can look at the negative. And to sit here and say to Mikel D, go fuck yourself, you fucking little troll cunt. Instead of saying something like that, which is just horrible and wrong, you should put out some positivity into the world. So I deleted that and I backtracked, because there's enough sadness out there right now. There's enough sadness out there right now. And I was wrong to pick Steve Erceg. I was wrong. I should have known the uphill battle that he had to fight. I should have known. You pick so many, there's 42 fight nights a year. 42 fight nights for the entire, 42 events over the entire year, plus the pay-per-views. 10 to 14 fights on every single one, So many divisions in the UFC. You got to pick the flyweight fights, the bantamweight fights, the featherweight fights. God, there's just so much to get through, isn't there? The lightweight fights, the welterweight fights, middleweight, that's a tough one, isn't it? Middleweight's always a hard one, Light heavyweight, some people say light heavyweight is one of the harder divisions to pick. You never know what John Jones is going to do. You never know if John Jones is going to decide to come back to light heavyweight tomorrow. He could mess things up. It's always one of the harder divisions to pick. And then heavyweight. Heavyweight fights as well. Ooh, I tell you. But that's all right, when you do that, sometimes you're going to get it wrong. And I think as a man, you've got to learn to be self-reflective and know when you got it wrong. And perhaps on this one I did. So I decided to answer Mikel with positivity instead. felt like that was the right thing to do. And then you got this dickhead. Tequisalaca, I mean, that's a Mexican right there. Tiquac, Alsalcahuac, and I don't want to keep harping on the negative, but I think it's important to really zone in on these people and to make sure that you pronounce their names properly. So I'm just going to punch this into Google Pronounce. How to pronounce. I'm just going to, and I should have had this ready to go, but unfortunately, Google how to pronounce Tequaxalaca. How to pronounce. It's just not coming up. Maybe we go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT. We might be able to get it to read it out to us, because I just want to make sure I get his name correct. I think it's important to get his name correct. ChatGPT. Let's just put that there. Just say read out to Quaxalactum. It seems like you might have typed a random sequence of letters. Could you clarify? Could you say what you've just done there? No, you can't. That's all right. We'll just have to freestyle it. I'm sorry. To quack. Where is he at? Let's have a look down here. Where is he at? Where are we doing? Hang on 1 second. Just got to dot my T's. No, I've got to sort by new. Hang on a second. Sorry, guys. I don't mean to slow the pace of the video down. I know we're having a lot of fun here. Let me just get this. I want to make sure I've got everything right. So Tequaxalwas just says lol. And again, a day ago. Now, some people, I know the way that the MMA community is going to react to me saying robbed. I know. They're going to think maybe I'm making all of this up. Maybe this is just a giant cope session, you know? Maybe I'm just talking out of my ass. Maybe I don't mean any of this, you know? Maybe this guy, this Aussie guy, is just playing this character of a bloke that picked Brandon Moreno, even though a bloke that pricked Steven Erceg. A bloke that picked Steven Erceg. Maybe he's just playing this character. You know, maybe it was obvious that Brandon Moreno was the right pick. Maybe he's this guy that's been saying for weeks Brandon Moreno was the right pick, and then someone came along and made a silly bet, and maybe he's just fallen down into this spiral that he can't keep up with. Maybe that's what they think. And I want them to know that is not the case at all. Not at all the case. I firmly believed that Brandon Moreno was going to win, and when I wrote robbed, and now in hindsight, it was a robbery, but it was the wrong pick to make. Because like when you're picking Paddy Pimlich versus Jared Gordon, you've got to try and think, what do the UFC want? You know? Like when you look at the landscape of the UFC, this beautiful company that we all love, you know, you look at fights like Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2. And you've got to think to yourself, what does the UFC want to happen here? Where do they want this fight to go? And you know, they want Israel Adesanya to be the superstar going forward. And there was another little thing that gave a hint as to what was going to happen next. There was another little thing, you know? And that was the fact that they announced UFC 30, what was it? The next UFC Noche 315, UFC 315, that's what it was. UFC 315. They announced that was going to be in Mexico. Was it 315? Was it 316? Was it 317? They announced it UFC 317. Was it 320? Was it no? Which one was it? 318? Where they announced, maybe it is maybe it's UFC 319 that they announced. UFC 319. Maybe it was UFC 320. UFC 320. They announced, yeah, it was UFC 320. I knew it was UFC 320. I knew it. It was UFC 320. That's it. So they announced UFC 320 moments before the co-main event. And how can you announce UFC 320, Noche UFC, unless you're setting up to have a Mexican champion there, you know? And you're setting up a title shot for Brandon Moreno. They need Mexicans on that card. And yeah, they can have Alexandre Pantoja on there. Yeah, if Yair beats Pitbull, they can put Yair on there. Yeah, if Volk loses to Lopez, which he won't, I guarantee that now. To this day, I 100% guarantee that Alexander Volkanovski will not lose to Diego Lopez. That is a lock, if there ever was a lock. That is a lock. I'm locking that in, right? I'm locking that into my phone right now. But you can see the way the UFC wanted the tides to go. And this being announced, Noche UFC. Again, where is UFC Anzac? Where is UFC Australia Day? Where's UFC at the Opera House? It doesn't bloody exist, does it, mate? Because it's all a fucking rort. It's a rort to rob the Australian audience. So this is actually point number 9 when it came to why the culture was against Steve Erceg. And although saying that Steve Erceg was going to beat Brandon Moreno with the kicks and the punches was technically the right call, it was actually the wrong call. It was the right call, but it was the wrong call with the way the culture of the UFC was going. So we're going to go point number 9, why it was the wrong call to pick Steve Erceg. Even though it was the right call, it was the wrong call against what the UFC wanted. Was the UFC had just announced Noche UFC. UFC announced Noche UFC. They need a Mexican win. That's point number 9. I mean, there's so many reasons why I shouldn't have picked Steve Erceg. It's actually, the writing was on the wall for anyone with eyes to see it. Why I shouldn't have picked Steve Erceg, because it was all going against it. In fact, point number 10. Point number 10. Point number 10. Point number 10. The 10th point. The point that comes after number 9. Point number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then point number 10. UFC London sucked an arsehole. And do you really think that the UFC are going to have 2 crowded events, not at the Apex, back to back, UFC London and then going into UFC Mexico? Do you really think that they're going to allow another hometown main event to lose? No, sir. No, they are not. The way that Leon Edwards was completely shut out against Sean Brady, although I guess if you go on stat for stat, band for band, if you're going to bring up the stats of that's not the right one. That's not the right page at all. If you're going to bring up the stats of this fight, you could bring up the stats of the Sean Brady. I guess Sean Brady lost that fight. I guess Sean Brady lost the Leon Edwards fight because the stats are almost identical. Steven Erceg landed just as good as Sean Brady did, if not better. And I don't think that's coping, because Sean Brady's shots were little pitter-patter shots. You know, while Sean Brady is in top position, mounted, they're just little pitter-patter shots to the body, where Steven Erceg is bang! Hard jab down the center. Bang! Hard jab to the body. Bam! Low kick, harder than Jan Blachowicz' low kick. So if we I mean, it's, again, it's an uphill battle, and it was the wrong pick to make because of the culture. They were just simply not going to allow Leon Edwards to get his fucking head kicked in at UFC London and then allow Brandon Moreno in his custom shorts with the corrupt judging, with the food poisoning going on, with the UFC being anti-Perth, with the UFC being anti-Australia and anti-Jack Della Maddalena, with the Australian pay-per-views being dog shit, with a greased up Mexican in Brandon Moreno, with the dodgy cameramen with the weird angles, with the UFC announcing UFC Noche not moments before, and UFC London sucking. There was no way they were going to give Little Erceg a win. Absolutely no way at all. And I should have seen it coming. So when I said robbed, getting back to my main point here before we really get into the real kickoff of the video, before we really get into the nitty gritty of the video, my main points for why I might be wrong about picking Erceg, as I said to Takwasika here, robbed, absolute robbery. And I think I've drawn a clear enough picture as to why we can stand by that was a robbery, you know. So with them, the next one here, we got Blot, and Blot says aged like milk. Aged like milk, he says. Aged like milk. Proud of yourself there, Blot? You proud of that, mate? You proud of saying aged like milk, huh? That's the kind of you must be friends with Milka here, Milika, Michael, Mikeld. You must be friends with him to be going around on the internet just saying things like aged like milk. You know, aging like milk is actually an oxymoron because aged milk is cheese, and cheese is one of the greatest things on the planet. And Mexicans love cheese. So maybe you're a Mexican fan. Maybe you are a Mexican fan, Blot. And that is why you're going aged like... So maybe what you're really saying there is that my video of how Steve Erceg would dominate Brandon Moreno aged like cheese, which Mexican love, which actually means it actually aged very well. Because, and I'm only going to do this 2 or 3 more times. When you look at the strikes, Erceg did technically win that fight. You know, now I'm not just gonna keep throwing that in your face, but I think that's what you meant when you said aged like milk. Like the aging of dairy makes cheese. Aged like cheese. Delicious, delicious cheese. Farmhouse cheese, farmhouse style cheese, specialty cheeses, a reduced fat sort of cheese, a low fat, any kind of cheese. That's what you mean when you say aged like milk. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some more positivity in the world, because I do believe that if you're gonna pick one of 2 ways to go, you can either choose to go the positive, or you can choose to go the negative. And with everything that's going around in the world today, I think we might choose to go with the positive way of doing things. I think that's the way we're going to go on this channel. So I'm going to say thank you. That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say thank you. It did age like cheese. Fine cheese, blue cheese, Australian cheese, King Island cheese. You might not know this, mate, but Australia has got some of the finest blue cheese in the world. Australian cheese versus the rest of the world. And Australia has got some of the best cheese in the bloody world. The French cheeses are generally more expensive than Australian cheese. The Australian cheese industry is relatively... That's big cheese working against Australia. I bet if we looked into who owned big cheese, we would see that it's the same people that work with the UFC. The same people that are against Australia here are against Australia at big cheese. But I'm telling you right now, Blot, Australia makes some of the best cheese in the world. Now, the next person who decided that he would just dance over to my channel and have a little fucking something to say because I had the balls to step up and say that Steven Erceg would win that fight, even though I might have been wrong about picking against the culture. I should have picked against the culture of the MMA community. There's Larry there with his little 2 cents. You can shut the fuck up, Larry. Is hitting the gates. And he just goes, nope. Nope. And again, the judges were biased. So you can see out here, I am out here on the streets talking one-on-one with the MMA community, trying to do anything I can to help them see that it's the judges that were wrong, that we were right. And if you got to understand, right? If these two had ever fought again, if Brandon Moreno, okay, let's really deep dive here, okay? It's time to get rid of all of this fluff. Time to get rid of all of this. That's Alexa Grasso's feet. Got nothing to do with any of this. Let me just reset here and make sure everything is above board, okay? Because again, I had all of this ready to go, but it's just the UFC are working handedly against us, boys. But that's all right. We will press on. We will get this done properly, right? Now, if these two young gentlemen were to fight again, let's say again, where is me bloody screen? Let's say again, right? If you had Steve Erceg versus Brandon Moreno, if they were to fight each other again, if you were to simulate this fight 1,000 times, 100 times, 1,000,000 times, if you were to simulate this fight again and again and again, I would be very confident in saying that the UFC would try and do everything they can to give Brandon Moreno the win, but essentially, the fight plays out the exact same way every single time. And Steve Erceg jabs his face up, low kicks the shit out of him, destroys the body, and we don't end up having a horrible, disgusting, dark day in MMA where the entire company knows that they've robbed the man. If the fights had been set up to happen before the next big Australian UFC card, UFC Perth, or maybe even UFC Melbourne, which, by the way, UFC has the highest attendance rate ever for any UFC event ever. You guys might not know this. You guys might not know that, and why would you? But the highest attendance rate for any UFC event ever, UFC Rousey versus Holly Holm. Okay, now just to have a look at these attendance numbers. Okay, UFC Rousey versus Holly Holm. UFC 195. I remember this like it was bloody yesterday. UFC 195. That's not right. That's not right at all. That is not right at all. You'll see 195, Ronda Rousey versus Holly Holm cancelled. Ronda Rousey, 193, UFC 193. Excuse me, UFC 193. Biggest attendance of an event ever. It blew people's minds how much that this fight went on. Right, so UFC Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm was a mixed martial arts event held in November 2014 to November 14th, 2015 at Etihad Stadium in Melbourne, Australia. The most attended UFC event in the history of the company, with 56,000 people filling the stadium. That was until UFC 24. Where was this one? Oh, again, this one was also in Australia. This one was also both of the UFC's two highest events of all time happened in Australia. We give them the most ticket sales, and the UFC just refuse to show Australia any respect. UFC 243, Robert Whittaker versus Israel Adesanya, the mixed martial arts pay-per-view event produced by the Ultimate Fighting Championship that took place on October 6th in 2019 at Marvel Stadium in Melbourne, Australia. The event was the fourth that the promotion had contested in Melbourne and the second venue following UFC 193 in November of 2015. The middleweight championship unification bout between the champion, Robert Whittaker, and Israel Adesanya, that was the event's headliner. This is the significance of Australian MMA at the mighty Marvel Stadium. And they just completely disregard us and stack the deck against Steve Erceg and completely rob him. Completely rob it. And again, I hate to keep bringing it up, but there he is. He looks devastated. He goes, my entire country has given everything to this company. And no matter what I do on the scorecards, no matter what I do, and this will be the last time that I bring it up, I think, because I think I've really hammered this point home, Erceg landed most of the shots, you know? So the women's bantamweight bout between the former bantamweight champion Holly Holm and the former title challenger Raquel Pennington was expected to take place at this event. The pairing previously met at UFC 184 at UFC 2015 when Holly Holm won by a split decision. However, on September 27th, it was revealed that Holly Holm withdrew from the event due to a hamstring injury. And of course, as we all know, the hamstring is any one of the three posterior thigh muscles in the human anatomy between the hip and the knee. So obviously, pulling a hamstring is going to hurt you. It's going to set you right back. Pulling a hamstring. I mean, the three muscles of the thigh, you know, they bend, they flex the knee, very similar to the biceps, you know, they strengthen the hip. The three true hamstrings cross beneath the hip and the knee joint, and therefore are involved with the knee flexing and extending. And Holly Holm, who I mean, one of her signature wins is defeating Ronda Rousey. I mean, you've got Holly Holm, one of the greatest kickboxers of all times, defeating Ronda Rousey, one of the greatest UFC fighters of all times. In women's UFC, of course. And again, this is a family company that proudly puts women and men next to each other right there. If she is tearing her hamstring, there is no way that she can go in there against the absolute dominator that is the bloody Raquel Pennington. Is that who she was? What? This is Holly Holm, and going in there against Raquel Pennington, who of course was so dominant, she ended up winning a championship herself. I mean, her Ultimate Fighter Championship. Pennington made her promotional debut back in 2013, but as we all know, she went on to win the Bantamweight Championship. She faced Mina Brown Silva in January of 2024 for the Bantamweight Championship, where she won the fight via unanimous decision. And then, unfortunately for her, in her own run, she went and she faced UFC then bantamweight, former UFC bantamweight champion Juliana Pena, another amazing goat of women's MMA, an absolute monster and marauder. She faced Juliana Pena on October 5th. On 2024 at UFC 307, where she unfortunately lost her championship via split decision. So this is the sort of history that goes into the big fights that happen in Australia down at Marvel Stadium. Just one of the biggest venues we have. Like, if you, the Americans, you probably can't picture stadiums like we have here in Australia. Stadiums like Marvel Stadium. They're fucking massive. Like, the numbers that these stadiums pull in. I mean, again, look at some of the seats that we're filling up in this arena. I mean, where we got the event. Yep. Fight night. The UFC event had a total of 57,000 people there. You know, the previous record was 56,000 that had been set at the same thing. This is the sort of cultural significance that Australia has when it comes there. And the Marvel Stadium itself, I mean, it's bloody massive. It is bloody massive. It was previously known as Etihad Stadium. It's known vernacularly here in Australia as Dockland Stadium, right? It's now sponsored by Marvel, and it's a multi-purpose sports and entertainment stadium in the suburb of Docklands. It's just phenomenal what can be done at that stadium. People don't appreciate that it was originally built in 1997. It was completed in the year 2000. It cost the Australian people nearly $1 billion in today's money. In 2023, that just shows how much inflation has gone up. Insane. And it features one of the few retractable roofs in the world, which is why the UFC love doing it here at Marvel Stadium, and why they can't get it going in South Africa. Because in South Africa, they have big stadiums there, massive stadiums, but they're completely different. completely different stadiums over in South Africa because they don't have a retractable roof, and Dana White doesn't like to be able to control things as specifically as he can when it comes to being able to do things here at Marvel Stadium here in Australia. And Australia provides that for the UFC right here in Melbourne. Right here in Melbourne, Victoria. And that's the sort of thinking and prowess that goes into our country. Well, we know if you're going to build a stadium that can put on an event of such massive significance that can have 57,000 people through the gate, all to watch two men in their underwear, in a cage, on a canvas, with a whole crowded arena around them, one referee in the middle, 3 judges on the outside, several cameramen, 3 different girls in bikinis telling you what round it is. If you're going to have all of that, not one, but sometimes 2 trucks pumping in all of that media and then putting it out to the rest of the world live on pay-per-view, on KO Sports, on ESPN, on all the different platforms around the world, on Fight Pass itself, especially if you're in the United Arab Emirates, then you need to have a venue that is going to be able to house all of that and be able to do it to the extent that you can with that many people in there. Because you can put on that kind of low effort, low show at the UFC Apex. Anyone can do that. Anyone can do that down at the Apex. But if you want to really put on a massive, massive pay-per-view, you need a massive, massive stadium. And that is why they come to Australia and they use Marvel Stadium, it is primarily used for Australian rules football. Sometimes it is used for cricket. You know, there are 2020 cricket matches there. You know, the Melbourne Victory soccer team do play there. But overall, you know, it is generally, I mean, they put on concerts there. I myself have seen AC/DC there. I've seen Green Day there. You might have heard of Green Day. They do a little song called The Boulevard of Broken Dreams. I don't know if you've heard that song, but they do the little song called The Boulevard of Broken Dreams. And I went and saw them. They opened up with Jimmy Eat World. It was an amazing event. Amazing event, much like UFC Mexico, unlike UFC London. But anyway, I feel like I'm digressing a little bit from the point. I want to keep this tight. I want to keep this locked in. I want to get to my core points. I want to get on my core points. So, what we're talking about here is an event that happened not at Etihad Stadium or Marvel Stadium or Dockland Stadium or Telstra Dome, depending what generation you're in. We're talking about an event that happened here in Mexico with a Mexican broadcasting team, Mexican referees, and I think that if this fight was to happen anywhere else at all, you know, not in let's say they were, but let's really get into the nitty gritty of this, right? If they were to rematch, Brandon Moreno, Steve Erceg, I believe, would win most of the time. And why would he win most of the time? Well, because this time, there wouldn't be a Noche to look forward to. Wouldn't be a Noche. So they wouldn't have UFC Noche there. So that means that they wouldn't be setting him up for the win. So that would be a tick. That would be something that would be going towards Steven Erceg in the next fight. And I think that is a very obvious and clear descriptor as to why he would win every single time if they did it again. Number 2, if they were to fight again, they would probably do it Vegas, where there would not be another greasy Mexican. There would not be another greasy Mexican if it happened at Vegas. And I know, I think we can say with almost 100% certainty. So that is another reason that Steven Erceg would win if they were to do it again. Again, I should have known all of this going into this fight. That's probably why I picked wrong. I think most people picking this fight, the 84% of people that did pick this fight, probably picked this fight because they thought Brandon Moreno was the better with the kicks and the punches. But I think, and again, I don't know if I want to really. I want to stick to the main points of the video without getting too far off track. But again, Steven Erceg did win via the kicks and the punches. So, I mean, I guess if you are going to say that they're going to rematch a couple more times, I mean, Steven Erceg has technically already won the first fight. Skill for skill, Steve has proved that he's better. So skill for skill, Steve is better. Fight ER. So skill for skill, Steve is the better fighter, and that is Another one going towards Steven Erceg and why he would win this fight. Skill for skill, he's the better fighter. There would not be another greased up Mexican because it would be anywhere else other than Mexico itself. Wouldn't be. Oh, and of course. Oh, how could you forget? Steve would be able to eat proper wholesome Australian food. Steve would be able to eat real food, unlike the Mexican dishes that they were serving up to these boys. That was just hurting them. I mean, the Mexican food that they were giving them was hurting them. I mean, the amount of fighters. Again, Lupe Godinez was there. She was about to shit herself. She was about to shit her. I mean, I don't want to be crass here. I don't want to be crass at all. We were saying you could either be positive. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm getting hit with emotions. I get hit with emotions because, again, I just keep thinking back to shit. I get hit with emotions because, again, you can tell that I've ruined a good man's career here. And it hurts. It hurts. So he's going to be eating proper Australian meals rather than eating whatever the shit slop they were giving them in Mexico that was making Lupe Godinez shit herself, Joe Piper pull out, the reason Kelvin Gastelum can't seem to lose any weight no matter what he does. Rather than eating enchiladas or quesadillas or pozzoles, for example, just thinking off the top of my head here, rather than eating pozzoles or rather than eating Chiles el Nogada, and rather than eating that, or eating mole, like what the fuck is mole? How do you expect Brandon Moreno how do you expect Steve Erceg to be ready for a fight when you're fucking serving him up plates of mole, whatever the fuck that is, He's not getting ready for camp with fucking tacos. Tacos aren't a fight food. Tacos are not a fucking fight food, Instead of eating carne asadas or Halvelos Rancheros, whatever the fuck they are, burritos. And you know what they say? No burrito comes out the way that it goes in. That's what they say there on the streets, Or tacos el pastoros, which are just tacos. I mean, what is the difference between a taco and a taco el pastoro? Does anyone really know? A quesadilla, and a quesadilla is just slop. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Let's call a screwdriver a screwdriver. Let's call a screw a screw. Let's call a light switch a light switch. Let's call an apple, an orange, the sky, the clouds, the clouds. It's just fucked. It's just fucked what they've done to him. So as I was saying, he's going to be able to eat proper food. Real proper food that his gut biome is used to. Unlike fajitas or tortillas or tamales, like what are they? Or guacamole, Or birria. What is a birria? Or churros. Churros aren't even food. That's a candy. Imagine you go to the UFC PI in Mexico. You're trying to cut fucking weight. You're dripping with salt. And they go, here's a plate of fucking churros. Yeah, how am I meant to rehydrate with that? And there's little Brandon Moreno just shoveling churros into his mouth, playing with Legos, knowing that the judges have already got the scorecards written out for him. The only thing that's bothering Brandon Moreno is he can't put his little bloody Lego set together because there's so much fucking grease on his fingers. So Steve Erceg, next time he's not going to be eating elote, or pico de gallo, or crumb caramel, or bassarola. He's not going to be eating all that shit. And we know how it affects the fighters. That's the other thing. We know how it affects the fighters because they've told us in the past, right? They've let us know about it, right? And I want to get on with the video. I want to get on with breaking down. Exactly what went wrong here in the card. So we'll get the video started in a moment, but I think it's important to really look at, and then this young man has shared with us what his experience has been of Mexican food. And a young man named MMA Joey is the first thing that's coming up on Twitter. So let's have a look here, and let's listen to what this world-class athlete, has to say about his experience. I don't want to do that at all. Let's have a look at what this world-class athlete has to say about his experiences on a Western gut biome eating Mexican food. I don't want to talk over you, Joe. This is Joe Pyfer. He was meant to be fighting Kelvin Gastelum, another easy setup for Team Mexico. Let's have a listen to what he has to say. Right. I don't want to cut him off. I don't want to talk over him. I don't want to interrupt him too much. I don't want to hold him up. I want to understand what he is saying because I think it's important. I think it's important to get a first-hand perspective what it's like introducing yourself to a whole new gut biome. You know, they say that you need to acclimate to altitude, which it might be right. Maybe you do need to acclimate to altitude, but maybe it's also important, you know, and maybe it's also important to acclimate to a gut biome, to acclimate to a gut biome, because we acclimate to a gut biome because we Westerners, we're not used to so many, and it's like having the Indians come over to Vegas. You know, they're used to their curries and their salted meats. They're used to doing things differently, and then they come over to Vegas and it's all alcohol and cigarette smoke in the air. I'm sure they need to acclimate to it, you know. And I think to help your microbe acclimate to changes, you need to focus on diverse, plant-based, rich, fibrous foods, you know? Fermented foods, foods with probiotics in it, you know? And while you're doing that, you need to limit processed foods, and you also need to try and maintain a healthy and a stress-free environment and get a lot of sleep. And what is a training camp? We're going to get into this. I want to hear from Pyfer. And then I want to start the video and really nail and lock down what went wrong in the fight. So we just need to set up everything first. We need to understand what the UFC expected. We need to understand what Brandon Moreno was going through and his cheating with the judges. We need to stop and understand what Steve Erceg was going through. And then we also need to understand what was going on in their stomachs as well, because there was clearly something going on in the stomachs, you know? And the UFC are very good at saying, you know, do you need tablets to help you sleep? Do you need to sleep at the UFC PI to acclimate to the different pressures, the air pressures? But what about the gut biome? Because they say the first fight happens with the scales, you know? That's what they say. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep it together, but it's very hard knowing that they've robbed Erceg. And there's a lot to break down in this. You'd think one fight would be easy to break down, and I'm chewing at the bit to get into it and get started on this, and to break down every frame by frame of the video like the weasel does. I'm chewing at the bit to do it, and I want to do it, and I'd love to get into it, but we need to set the scene properly. So, was his stress levels during the training camp where they needed to be? Was Pyfer's? Was Erceg's? We don't know. You know, was he getting in good probiotics? Was he reducing the consumption of highly processed food, which contain ingredients that can negatively impact your gut bacteria? Was he staying hydrated? We know that he wasn't staying hydrated. He had to cut weight, and you've got to stay hydrated. You know, I myself, while I'm just getting everything ready to start talking about this actual fight, to start really looking at it frame by frame, I'm staying hydrated as well. How much sleep were they getting? You know, you got to aim for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep every single night, and that is critical in the role of your gut health. And leading into a fight camp, I don't know if you're getting that much sleep. You know, pretty sleepy, bro. It can be happening at different times, bruh. So I don't know. And then of course you're managing stress. Like chronic stress can negatively impact the gut health. So you have to find ways to manage the stress and the exercise and maybe even do some meditation. And I don't know about you, but Joe Pyfer to me does not look like the kind of guy that gets in a little bit of meditation. Not even a lot of not any meditation at all. Joe Pyfer doesn't seem like the bloke that gets in meditation. Steven Erceg does. I reckon. Steven Erceg, he gets there in Perth, gets zen, thinks about the fight coming up. I reckon he does. So he's probably managing his stress and prioritizing sleep and staying hydrated and limiting his processed foods. He's probably on some probiotics. Maybe he's getting in some fermented foods as well. I don't know. But it's different for every single fighter, you know? He's definitely engaging in exercise because physical activity does help promote a healthy gut biome. Well, let's see. Anyway, I don't want to ramble on this. It's just, I just think it's important to understand where Joe Pyfer's coming from. I don't want to ramble on this too much. So let's look at Pyfer here from this lovely young man named MMA Joey, who I'm sure is a beautiful individual. And he said, Joe Pyfer is the biggest crybaby. Fuck that country. Maybe this is Pyfer's words, maybe not Joey's words. Fucking shithole because he got sick and pulled out of a fight. Next time, man up and fight the super favorable matchup you were given instead of being a beta. Jeez, I don't know if I like the way that MMA Joey there has phrased that, you know? Like, to me, I think you can choose to look at the world in two ways. Either with the positive or with the negative. You can either choose to look at the world through a positive lens or through a negative lens. And I think the way that MMA Joey here, who I'm sure is a lovely young individual, has just been rolled up just once or twice and is maybe looking at the world through a negative lens. Like, there's no need to throw words around like beta. There's no need to throw words around like that, especially when Joe Pyfer, he's recovering from being grievously ill, and here you are just attacking him for no reason. I'm sure, much like Rosie O'Donnell on a bad night of booze and Ambien, Joe Pyfer is feeling food sickness deep in his gut, and maybe what he says in this video isn't the nicest way of putting it, but we should be treating him with loving and open gloves because we know that he's going through something here. So for MMA Joey to just come out and say something like this, and a favorable matchup. I mean, Kelvin Gastelum is the kind of fighter that takes Israel Adesanya to an absolute war. Kelvin Gastelum is the kind of fighter that takes Israel Adesanya to an absolute war, pushes him to the absolute limit, Kelvin Gastelum is no give me a fighter. He is a professional mixed martial artist. You know, he's right now he is competing at welterweight, but he's competed at middleweight. He has fought everywhere. I mean, in 2013, that's when he was first selected to fight on Team Jones versus Team Sonnen. Just a goated time to be on The Ultimate Fighter. Just a goated fight. I mean, that season of The Ultimate Fighter. Now, I don't want to get into a tangent, you know? I want to stay here on point and really get into the fight and break down every single frame of this kick by kick and bit by bit. And we will. But that season of The Ultimate Fighter, of John Jones versus Chael Sonnen, it was the 17th ever season of The Ultimate Fighter. It was announced in 2012. This is how far back the career of Kelvin Gastelum goes. This is how far back it goes. And there were so many good names on there. There was Luke Barnett. There was Uriah Hall. There was Zach Cummings. There was Kelvin Casey. I'm sorry. Kelvin Gastelum was on that one. It was just a who's who of fighters. An absolute who's who of fighters, you know? And you were wondering, was Kelvin Gastelum going to make it? You know, was he going to make it through the top? Because he got a rough run to the top, mate. He got a rough run to the top, you know? At first it was Kelvin Gastelum versus Bubba McDonald. Remember Bubba McDonald? I remember Bubba McDonald. Fuck, he was fucking good. He was fucking good, but Kelvin got him round 2 sub. Got him in the round 2 sub. And then Kevin had to keep going and fuel his body. Remember these stories from Chael? I'm fueling my body. Kelvin Gastelum would cut weight by eating pasta. He's never changed. To this day, Kelvin Gastelum hasn't changed. And that's why his gut biome is so good. Because again, what were we saying about gut biomes? You got to eat good, healthy fiber. You got to keep your stress levels low, get good sleep. And Kelvin was doing that, not a bloody worry. So then, Kelvin Gastelum, he beats Bubba McDonald in the opening round. Not the opening round, the opening bracket. Let's say the bracket. The first episode, not the first episode, but the first round of fights. Kelvin Gastelum gets Bubba McDonald in a sub, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure it was. I remember it to this day. It was a sub. Yeah? Not a foot long, not a 6-inch, but a submission. Yeah? And then he goes into the second bracket to fight Colin Hart. Round 1 KO. And this is where Israel Adesanya knew that he had something very, very powerful and scary in front of him. Because from that moment, from his second fight, under the beautiful brand and the banner that is the UFC, Kelvin Gastelum was already getting knockouts. Round 1 knockout. Colin Hart. And Colin Hart is a fucking, he's a savage, mate. People forget, man. Colin Hart. And that moved Kevin Gastelum on to the semi-finals. And he was in there against Josh Simon. And again, Kevin Gastelum, round 1 submission. And we knew that we were working with a real fucking contender here. Kelvin Gastelum, round 1 submission. To where it gets all the way up to the last bracket of tough. John Jones versus Sonnen. And Chael Sonnen has been coaching and mentoring Kelvin Gastelum this entire time. And he's in there against Uriah Hall. And some people, they want to say, who's Uriah Hall? Wait, what? Well, Uriah, like Kelvin Gastelum versus Uriah Hall, like anyone really cares about Uriah Hall. But I'm telling you, mate, Uriah Hall was a monster in the UFC. An absolute monster in the UFC. Yeah? He's got wins against Anderson Silva, against Chris Weidman. These are some of the greatest names of all time. And so you've got Kelvin Gastelum. He's in there against Uriah Hall, you know, he's got a win over Gegard Mousasi, yeah. And just because he's born in a little town of Jamaica, you know, and moves all the way to New York City, you know, grows up in Queens in the United States, 13 years old, and I'm talking about Uriah Hall here. And he sets his sights on the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and then he runs into the fucking human wall, the wrecking machine. That is Kelvin Gastelum. That is who Uriah Hall runs into. And Kelvin Gastelum gets the win over him on that very season of Tough. Gets the win over him on Tough season 17. This is the sort of bloke that we're dealing with in Kelvin Gastelum. And that's just his early career, yeah? That is when he goes back to middleweight. And Gastelum, he was meant to fight Anderson Silva at UFC 212, I remember. But unfortunately, he was pulled from that event because he liked to smoke a little bit of the marijuana. And who can blame the guy? Just have a little bit of toke every now and then. There's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, he gets pulled out of that. And so instead, Gastelum goes to fight Belfort. That gets turned into a no contest. It's a fucking mess. It is a mess. Until Gastelum goes in there to fight Chris Weidman. He fights Chris Weidman on 2017 of the main event of Fox UFC 25, I believe it was. 25. Yes, that's what it was. Fox 25. Unfortunately, he loses that fight, but it's not over for Kelvin Gastelum because he gets right back in there against Ronaldo Souza. He does. He does, and he wins that fight by a split decision. And now Kelvin, the mighty Kelvin Gastelum, he's set all the pieces back up on the board, and he is going back home to where it all started, to the Ultimate Fighter. And Kelvin Gastelum is selected to go against Robert Whittaker to be the coaches of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And the 28th season, would you believe it, in 2018. Insane to think of the career that the dominant Kelvin Gastelum has had, where they were going to be fighting for the middleweight championship afterwards at UFC. What was it? Which one was it? It was UFC 234. At UFC 234. UFC 234. I remember this one because I had set up the backyard of my house at UFC 234. It was when I had decided, the UFC, it's coming back to Melbourne. It's going to be an amazing event. UFC 234. It's back at Melbourne. It's going to be an amazing event. It's in my home city, and I invite everyone around. And I go into the backyard, and I'm a drywaller. I'm a proud drywaller. So I've got a whole lot of scaffolding around my house, and I set up the scaffolding, and then I've got all these drop sheets as well to cover people's houses. So I set up the scaffolding, and I wrap it in drop sheets to stop the glare of the sun bouncing off the TV screen. So I've built like an outdoor pub thing, and I've taken my TV from inside my living room, and I've stuck it inside the scaffolding, and the scaffolding is wrapped up in drop sheets to stop the glare of the sun bouncing off it, so we can enjoy UFC 234, which was meant to be Robert Whittaker versus Kelvin Gastelum. And then just the morning of, the absolute unexpected happens. It's horrible. It's Robert Whittaker, he's pulled out of the main event at like 3 o'clock in the morning. It's so... It hurts me. It hurts me. He's got a hernia, and his bowels have collapsed. I mean, if you don't know what a hernia is, it is just horrible. It is just horrible. It's an abdominal exit of the tissue of the organ of the bowels. It's the wall cavity which resides. Yeah, it's part of the intestinal tract. It's just horrible. And so many different types of hernias can occur around the abdomen, around the groin, and this is what's happened to poor Robert Whittaker here at UFC 2 at that particular main event. It was just horrible. And they can occur more often on the right-hand side rather than the left-hand side. It can strangle as part of the blood flow to the bowel, it just causes severe pain and tenderness to the area. It can cause chest pain. It can cause swelling. The risk factors are it's horrible. It's horrible. You know, like people don't know just how bad hernias are. Like in 2019, I'll have you know, and this is one of those weird little facts that just gets caught in your brain sometimes. There was 32 million hernias, and they were preventable as well. Makes you think, doesn't it? So anyway, as I was saying, Kelvin Gastelum gets pulled from the fight, and instead the main event, it's changed to Israel Adesanya versus Anderson Silva. And Israel Adesanya, I believe he fights. They have a main event fight, which is it's a wonderful fight. It's an absolute wonderful fight. But unfortunately, he's out of Robert Whittaker is out of action for a while, so Gastelum has to fight Israel Adesanya, and I believe it was UFC 244 in New York, November 2019. 2019. That's what I reckon it was. That's what it was. Except once again, the New York State Commission, they weren't happy with Kelvin Gastelum. The Athletic Commission, they saw a weigh-in video that they think that Gastelum was touching another person while he was on the scale. I remember that now. And they were iffy about whether or not he was actually going to be ready to fight Israel Adesanya on weight and actually fight for the belt. And they fined Kelvin Gastelum $1,000 for that. They did. Lucky he wasn't disqualified. It really is. It really is. But this is the kind of warrior that Kelvin Gastelum is, because he fought Israel Adesanya to life and death. It was a split decision, that fight was. A split decision. And there was a look on Israel Adesanya's face where he said, I'm willing to die for this. You know, he was looking at the camera and he said, I'm willing to die for this fight. That's how hard the UFC pressed him. UFC 230. That's how hard Kelvin Gastelum pressed him at UFC 236. It was a life and death fight. I remember the look on Israel Adesanya's face where he was saying, I'm willing to die in this cage. It was a fight for the bloody ages. I mean, this is the thing. This is the thing about it, right? Like, you got people here like MMA Joey, people like MMA Joey, saying it's a favorable matchup. And I don't know. You know, I would think that someone like MMA Joey might respect the striking of someone like Israel Adesanya. You know, you would think that MMA Joey might know something about Israel Adesanya and his striking, because here is Short King Gastelum putting it on Israel Adesanya, putting it on him. And there he is with that blocky Mexican body, and he is going tit for tat, strike for strike, bang for bang, dollar for dollar with Israel Adesanya. And it makes you wonder, like, when you are saying sentences like this, you know, when you are saying things like this about how it's a favorable matchup, you don't know if he actually means it. Because if he knew anything about the sport, he would know that Kelvin Gastelum is nobody's scrub. Nobody's scrub at all. In fact, I don't want to bring up, you know, the stats again and again and again and again and again. But I'd love to know who was actually getting the better of that fight. You know? Who was actually winning that fight? Who was actually putting it on Gastelum versus Israel? Who was actually Kelvin Gastelum, Israel Adesanya? Where is that bloody fight? God, I remember it was Kelvin Gastelum, Israel Adesanya. What a fight. God, what a fight. What a battle that was. Where's the fucking stats? Kelvin Gastelum versus Israel. Where are the fucking stats? Bring up the stats in the fight. Here we go. Right. I mean, I don't want to keep harping on about stats, but I mean, here's Israel Adesanya and in the blue, and you can see that he's handedly getting outstruck by Kelvin Gastelum. Red all the way up there, handedly getting outstruck by Kelvin Gastelum in round one. 50-50 in round three, edge for edge, shot for shot, bang for bang. Round four, fucking Gastelum comes at him, lands all of the significant strikes and all of the damage, and you can see that it's most likely 2-2 going into the fifth round of Israel Adesanya's title fight. And this is prime Israel Adesanya, where they're saying he is going on to become one of the most dominant fighters in the UFC, and Kelvin Gastelum is pushing him hard to the edge. You know, that is the sort of career that Kelvin Gastelum has. And I worry about saying that this is a give-me fight for someone like Joe Pyfer, who is suffering horribly from a terrible weight cut and food poisoning. I don't know. I don't think that's a close fight for any man. I mean, let's not forget that Kelvin Gastelum did end up fighting Robert Whittaker eventually. UFC, it was UFC Fight Night. UFC Fight Night, Kelvin Gastelum. UFC Fight Night on ESPN 29. And he fought that fight, and it was a unanimous decision to Robert Whittaker. But he took Robert Whittaker right to the fucking edge. He took Robert Whittaker right to the edge. And I hate to keep, harping on about Kelvin Gastelum and looking at his entire career. I don't think there's a need to really, because I want to get into the fight between Brandon Moreno and Steve Erceg. But I think it's important to see how the food affected. I think it's important to see how the food affected Steve Erceg by looking at other fighters on the card in Joe Pyfer and how it affected them. And to say that Kelvin Gastelum doesn't know how to fight is ridiculous to me. Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So I think that's enough. Going on about just how hard of a challenge Kelvin Gastelum is. I think that's enough. Kelvin Gastelum is no man's fault. I'm sorry for that little tangent. I want to get into the fight. I want to set things up with Steve Erceg and Brandon Moreno properly. But I hate seeing, you can either, I've always said, and I maintain this, and it's something that I say it rarely. But when I say it, I want it to make sure that it really lands home, and I'll share it with you. There's two ways to look at life. You can look at the positive, or you can look at the negative. You can look at the positive or the negative. And I always try and look at things in the positive. The positive. So, and again, when we're talking about everything that went on here on this particular night and how I ended up getting it wrong, what we're really talking about is how did the food and the weight cut and the circumstances affect Steve Erceg. And we're going to know about the food because we're going to hear from one of the fighters on the card in Joe Pyfer. And and Joe Pyfer was up for a hell of a fight. A hell of a fight against Kelvin Gastelum. So, let's hear what he has to say. I don't want to cut him off. I don't want to go on for too long. I don't want to speak over him. I didn't want to make a big to-do about this. But I just thought it was important to have some context. And so that way, next time MMA Joey tweets something, he can be a little bit more careful with what he's saying and his words. You've got a limited amount of words when it comes to a tweet. You haven't got many characters at all to work with in a tweet. You haven't got many at all to work with in a tweet. And when it comes down to it, you've got to choose your words very specifically. Very specifically, because Twitter is a giant platform. X is a huge platform. And when you're out there signal boosting things, you've only got 280 characters or glyphs. But generally, I like to call them characters, And then there's a limit there, Originally, it was 140. But they opened it up to 280. So you've got to be very, very careful with it because some people they just throw tweets around willy-nilly and I don't like that at all. So I don't want to talk over him, but let's hear what Joe Pyfer has to say regarding the food in Mexico. Okay. I think we've set this up. I think we've set up the context of this correctly. Here is Joe Pyfer in his own words about the food in Mexico.
But for now, it still stings that I didn't get to fight, but
again, I don't want to cut him off too much. But you see how hurt he is there? Listen to him. Listen to his voice. See how hurt he is there? Some people think that's like gravel in the voice might be caught by a bit of salt in the back of the throat. That's disappointment. Because he knows that he was going in there against a monster of Kelvin Gastelum and he missed out on the opportunity. And the man is hurting. And I think we should have a little bit of the compassion. You know, the man's hurting. He's in pain. This is a dark time for him. Listen to him here.
But for now, it still stings that I didn't get to fight. But the last thing I will address is I don't care if it's offensive to you.
And I think this is where it's upsetting Joey. I don't want to go on about this too much, but I think it is upsetting Joey. This is probably what's upset him. Let's see what he has to say. I'm not too much longer on this, but because I want to get into the actual fight and start breaking it down bit by bit. So I don't want to harp on about this for too long. I don't want to listen. I appreciate you being here and everything that we're going through, but I just, with the amount of vitriol and hate and spite that I got from the MMA community, I think it is important to get out why I believe that picking Steve Erceg, although when it comes to the kicks and the punches and the teeps and the jabs and the hooks and the takedown defense and the give and take and the flow of the fight, when it comes to the overall arching of the fight and why picking Steve Erceg was maybe the right call in the nitty-gritty back and forth of the fight, maybe picking him was the wrong decision overall, because there were just so many other factors going in there. And really, an MMA fight isn't just kicks and punches. So I just want to make sure it's clear, you know? I don't want to waste your time with this. I want it to be clear and proper and reasoned and understandable as to why the fight turned out the way that it turned out. And I think we're getting close. I believe in my heart now that we have sort of addressed everything around it. You know, now that we're starting to get a clear timeline of events here, the judging, the food poisoning, the weight cut, the UFC being anti-Perth, anti-Eureka Stockade. We've still got to get into the Eureka Stockades. The JDM team, we've really got to get into that as well. The Australian pay-per-views, the Grease Gate, dodgy camera work, Noche being announced before the main event, and UFC London sucking. I think that does set the table, put the cutlery on it, the plates, the knives, the forks, the spoons, the soup spoon, the dessert spoon, the butter knives, the steak cutting knives, the sherry glass, the scotch glass, the champagne. I think now it is starting to set the stage for the timeline to understand the fight. Now we're starting to get there. And I just wanted to make sure that we were on that together. And again, when it comes to the food side of things, anyway, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. You know, I want this to be a concise video, and I think it will be. And I believe, and I understand, and I trust, and I hope, and I care that by the time we get to the end of this video, you will understand why maybe picking Steve Erceg was the right but the wrong call. And how there might need to be some self-reflection here as well. there might need to be some self-reflection here as well. You know? Like Joe Pyfer. Just being honest with it. There might need to be some self-reflection as well. Maybe I was wrong to see all of this. Maybe there's something deep within my own childhood love. Maybe in my parenting. The way that my parents loved me. Maybe. We might, you know, that's one of the things, you know, because Joe Pyfer, he's a kid that was willing to step up and have a go. You know, and I can see in his eyes. I can see in his eyes here how hurt he is that he wasn't able to fight. You know, he really wanted to test himself against the warrior that is Kelvin Gastelum. But Joe Pyfer, he wasn't able to get in there and get it done, you know? It sucks because there's something about him. There's something about him. And something about him coming up through it all where he wanted to go for it. He decided that he wanted to be an MMA fighter. And he wanted to have a crack, a real go at it. And it sucks when you can't. Because I look into his eyes and I see this young man, you know? He's young, and I say young man because he's younger than me. People don't know this. But Joe Pyfer, he's born in 1996. He's younger than me. Been fighting at middleweight, you know? Grew up in New Jersey. Rough town, New Jersey. Bloody rough town it is, mate. You know? Did wrestling in high school. 10th grade he started wrestling. Then he started to get in a little bit of jiu-jitsu, a little bit of judo, which as we've covered, isn't a real sport, you know? Made his early debut. Look, people don't know this, but I've been on the Joe Pyfer train for a long bloody time, mate. Long time have I been on the Joe Pyfer train. Back in 2018 in Philadelphia. Hard city, Philadelphia. I've been to Philadelphia. Disgusting city. Disgusting city. Disgusting city. Blood, violence, cows walking around. But he went there and he took off his shirt. And he got inside that 8-sided cage against another man, and he went for it. And he went for it. He competed 7 more times professionally. He went 7-1, winning a I think it was an ROC middleweight championship along the way. Craziness. And then he went and fought on Dana White's Contender Series. Fought Dustin Stoltzfus. That ain't a nobody, mate. People forget Dustin Stoltzfus, but I don't. Whew. 2020, Joe Pyfer steps up, fights on Dana White's Contender Series. Now look. He lost that fight. And you could say a man like Joe Pyfer losing his first fight on the Contender Series, maybe he's a man who quits. You know, maybe he's a man who quits, but you can hear in his voice, listen to how disappointed he is with not being able to fight Gastelum.
But for now, you know, it still stings that I didn't get to fight. But
see, this isn't a man who's just going to take a loss on Dana White's Contender Series and just disappear into the sunset. No. Not Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer's going to get back in there. He's going to get back in there, and he's going to fight on Dana White's Contender Series again. July 2026 it was. 2020, no, not 2026. July 2022. That's when it was. July 2022. Joe Pyfer. Big. Now this is big, you know, because you might be able to fight on Dana White's Contender Series once. You might be able to fight on Contender Series twice. But it is very rare for anyone to fight on Contender Series a third time. Almost unbelievable to fight on Dana White's Contender Series the third time. So you know that it's do or die on the Contender Series. Like people they don't know what kind of a firehouse it is inside of the Contender Series. You know, they don't know just how hard it is. Yeah, it's a weekly competition on Fight Pass, on ESPN. Yeah. None of the fighters involved have an existing UFC fighter contract yet. So they're all fighting to get into the UFC. That kind of pressure cooker is where the UFC Apex does its best work. It does its best work there. And ever since the Contender Series started all the way back in 2017, it has produced nothing but absolute killers. Nothing but killers. It is a firehouse of creating talent. And that's where Joe Pyfer went to fight twice and to get back in there. So he knew that he had to get the win, and he did. Oh my God, did he get the win? He faced, who was it? Hang on, I'll get it. Hang on, who did he get? Aussie Diaz. He fought Aussie Diaz. Dana White's Contender Series of July 2022. He fought Aussie Diaz. He won via knockout. And that is where the famous B. Joe Pyfer came from. So Joe Pyfer, he's not a man to just eat some mole, whatever that is. He's not a man to eat some mole and just want to back out of a fight, especially against one of the GOATs, Kelvin Gastelum. No. He wants to get in there and he wants to get it done. Then, after he got his contract, he goes in there and he faced no one other than Alan Elmendowski. September 2022. Alan Elmendowski. UFC Fight Night. Wins via a knockout in round 1. This is the kind of bloke that we're dealing with here. He gets knocked down, he gets up again. You're never going to keep him down. He grows up, he goes and fights in Philadelphia, a hard city, Philadelphia. Sometimes you got to take a whiskey shot. Sometimes you have to take a bourbon shot. But he gets knocked down and he gets up again. And when you have got the kind of mindset to get knocked down and get up again, it does something different to you. You get knocked down and then, I'm feeling bad. I'm feeling bad for Steve Erceg, but I need you to understand what it's like to have the lyric, I'm not going to do that. What it's like to get knocked down, but then get up again. Because you're never going to keep Joe Pyfer down. You're never going to keep him down. You're never, ever going to keep him down. He'll get knocked down, but he'll get back up again. And it doesn't matter if it hurts him, because sometimes he'll get over it. He'll have a whiskey drink. He'll have a vodka drink. He might have a lager drink. He might even have a cider drink. And he knows that he's going to get back in there, and he'll sing the songs that remind him of the good times. And sometimes he'll sing other songs that remind him of even better times. And he'll say, oh, Pyfer boy, oh, Pyfer boy. It doesn't matter if you get knocked down, you'll get up again. It doesn't matter if you get knocked down, you will get back up again. And whether you're pissing the night away or not, it just does not matter. He gets knocked down and he gets up again, and you'll never bloody keep Joe Pyfer down. Never, ever, ever keep Joe Pyfer down. And that's what, so he gets the second win. And then he goes, and he's in the UFC now, and he's off and bloody running, and he's in there against Alan Elmendowski. And he gets the performance of the night, believe it or not. Craziness. Imagine that. Your first fight in the UFC, and you get the performance of the night. Madness. And so he is now set up, and he's in there to face the unstoppable, unbeatable, unbelievable, unequivocal, undefeatable GM3 Gerald Meerschaert. Gerald Meerschaert, you need to understand the sort of wins that Gerald Meerschaert has under his belt. It would blow your fucking mind to know that you were going in there with a monster like Gerald Meerschaert. So if you think that you're going in there against a monster like Gerald Meerschaert, you are absolutely, and you've taken him on, and you've been knocked down, and you've gotten back up again. There is no bloody way in hell that you are worried about fighting Kelvin Gastelum, When Jared Milshad has been in there against people like Thiago Santos, Jack Hermanson, Kevin Holland, yeah, Eric Anders. These are the names that the mighty GM3 has fought. He went in there against Hamzat Chimaev, believe it or not. And people forget that, man. People forget that he's been in there against Bruno Silva, Andre Petrovsky, Edmund Shabazian. He's been in there against a Riddler, a former one championship double champ, one championship fighting organization, double champion, and GM3 has gone in there and fought them, and so has Joe Pyfer. Chest out, chin up, and he went in there and he won that fight via a unanimous decision. Then after that, he goes in there against Marc-Andre Barriot, and he gets a performance of the night bonus. This is what we are talking about. This is what we are talking about. And now Joe Pyfer is set up to fight Kelvin Gastelum in Mexico. Now the table is set, so we understand what is going on through this young man's mind before he gets in the cage to fight Steve Erceg at UFC Mexico. Now the table is set to understand this particular thing, and I remain. I don't want to harp on about it. I don't want to harp on about this particular tweet, but I think it's important to understand the full context. So, we understand Joe Pyfer now. We're in his mind, in his heart, in his stomach biome. We get where he is making this video from. We now understand who he is going in there against, Kelvin Gastelum, an absolute bloody warrior. We understand the circumstances of the card. Now we have 100% context going into this fight, going into this particular tweet of Joe Pyfer, and I don't want to piss fart around with this tweet, but it's vital to understand a Westerner's perspective on the food that Steve Erceg was suffering from. So, let's hear what Joe Pyfer has to say. Finally, I'll let him take the floor.
You know, it still stings that I didn't get to fight, but the last thing I will address is I don't care if it's offensive to you. I will never go back to that country. I did everything right. I slept in a tent. I did all this work to still get sick. Some people are saying it wasn't the food, saying I got altitude sickness. I'm not.
This is I don't understand, it's very weird to me how people are saying that it's not the food. You know, if he is doing everything right, staying in altitude tents, staying everywhere that you're meant to make sure that you get customized to it properly. You know, Mexican food, it is delicious. It is. I wouldn't deny that, unless it's Taco Bell, that is slop. It is nutritious. It can be very high in calories though, and saturated fat and sodium. And it does have some health risks if it is consumed excessively, or if you are not really microgut biomed ready to go for it, you know? Many popular Mexican dishes, especially the fried ones, are very high in calories and saturated fat. And that can contribute to heart disease, which would obviously not, I mean, something that is leading towards heart disease is certainly not going to help you before a fight. High sodium content as well in a lot of Mexican food. And how are you meant to cut weight or be healthy going into a fight? Yeah. There is also lead contamination in Mexican foods. There has been a study in Mexico that have found that some commonly consumed foods, including staples of the Mexican diet, have contained lead, posing a very, very significant health risk. And this is a clear line of evidence that shows that lead contamination is in commonly consumed food, and that poses a very, very big health risk. And that was a study that was conducted by scientists from the National Institute of Public Health at the University of Laguna in Mexico. The research, I remember when I read about this study, it was horrible. It was conducted in collaboration with Pure Earth. And it focused, it zoned in, it locked in, it really did a deep dive into 103 of the most consumed foods, beverages, and spices of Mexico. I remember this. And the results showed that 18% of the products, and that is 18%. I mean, if I was to say, give me your money and I'll up it by 18% and give it back to you, that is significant. 18% is significant. That's almost the amount of strikes that and I don't want to keep bringing this back up. This will be one of the last times that I bring it back up, but I just think it's almost the amount of strikes that Steve Erceg, 18% is almost the equivalent of the amount of strikes that Steve Erceg got over Brandon Moreno, which is quite a lot. Really, that is quite a lot of strikes. So again, I'm not trying to piss fart around here, but 18% is a lot. And there's a reason that if it had that much lead in the food, that Joe Pyfer was probably feeling some kind of way. It showed that 18% of the photo had particles that are harmful with heavy metals, exposing just a huge amount of consumer safety problems. And the study, it really did, I remember this so clearly, it zoned in on the helplessness of the consumers. Because the foods that they studied were absolute staples of Mexican diet. It was in their rice, their wheat, their soy products, pepper, their chili, the meats, the ham, the sausages, the based sweets, the baby food as well. Who would think of the children? Sad. Poor babies out there in Mexico getting poisoned by their own food companies. And here is Joe Pyfer speaking on behalf of the Westerners who went over there to fight. Speaking on behalf of Erceg himself. And you've got the babies suffering from this horrible contaminated Mexican food. And again, Lupe Godinez was about to shit herself in round three. That's just horrible. Oh, God. So what do we, lead, there's lead, I remember there was leads in there, neurotoxins. There was an industrial waste found in there and contamination of the air and the irrigation. So you've got industrial waste mixing into the water that is getting sprayed over this food. It's going to cause severe and permanent brain damage. Like Joe Pyfer, he's such a nice and fun-loving and caring individual. And now because he's gone to Mexico once and he's got this horrible, horrible food poisoning, it might cause permanent brain damage and alter the structure of his nervous system. I'm not making this up. This is fucked, actually. This is actually fucked what they found in Mexican food. 18% of Mexican food. Hang on, let me see if I can bring it back up. Hang on 1 second. We'll get back to Joe Pyfer. This is a big deal, man. But this is not a joke here. 18% neurotoxins through industrial waste and contamination in the water and the agriculture used. Potential consequences of lead, severe damage, brain damage, altering the function of the nervous system. What the fuck? So this kind young man, people might start to look at him and say that he's, I don't know, a little bit salty, a little bit angry, a little bit on edge. And I don't know if we can ever really say that this is his fault. You know, because now that he has been to Mexico and suffered from this food poisoning, now it is going to start to alter the way that he looks at the world. And it's going to really hurt him and severely set him back in life. And Joe Pyfer was one of those guys that was known for being positive. You know, Dana White would always say, be like Joe Pyfer. He was known for being positive. He was known for being a gritty wrestler in high school. He had a lot of mates. He went ahead, went to Philadelphia, got himself a couple of fights, and then bang, he's in the UFC and he's off and bloody running. And now this horrible thing has happened to him. And it just hurts me to see that someone like MMA Joey, whoever that is calling Joe Pyfer a crybaby. You know? When Joe Pyfer has essentially been assaulted by Mexico. Essentially, his gut biome has been assaulted by Mexico, just like Brandon Moreno was assaulted by Mexican judges. And I don't want to bring it up again. I don't want to keep harping on it. But it's almost like exactly the same way that Brandon Moreno was assaulted by Mexican judges, that the entire UFC company and roster was assaulted to their hearts and their cores, knowing what is going on here. And now Joe Pyfer, this lovely young man who has given his heart and his soul to try to get ready for this fight and do everything right in his own words, in his own bloody words, has been set back in his career, and he might never be the same. And people might go forward saying things like, Joe Pyfer's the crybaby. Next time, why don't you man up and fight a favorable matchup in Kelvin Gastelum, who we just went through. So that is horrible what's going on there. Probably from eating mole, whatever the fuck that is, a Mexican food called mole. What Mexican? What is that? I mean, what is mole? I mean, what? I mean, what are we? I mean, from your mouth to Lupe Godinez's ass. You know what I mean? I mean, there is a reason that Lupe Godinez is saying she wants to shit herself during the end of the round. Because that is what is going in. And if that's what's going in, I don't mean to be crass. I'm not trying to be crass. But if that is what is going in, what is coming out? You know, DC was talking about this, how horrible it was for him. And we've gone over how Steve Erceg looked a little bit malnourished. And I think we have found the culprit in this deep dive before we have even gotten into the fight, and we are about to get into the fight, and we will get into the fight, and we are going to break down the fight frame by frame. But if we're going to set the table, we're not putting mole on the table, especially with 18% of Mexican foods being contaminated, and this is what they're serving up to the fighters. So, poor salty man Pyfer is being set up for failure here, and they're going to call him salty for the rest of his life. So now, let's hear what he has to say. I want to hear what he has to say clearly. I don't want to interrupt him. I don't want to go on about it. I don't want to focus in on this tweet too much. I want to get back to the overall arching points of why picking Brandon Moreno, although it was the right pick with the kicks and the punches, might have been the wrong pick when we understand the circumstances. And I think we can really double up here on the food and say that there was potentially mole being served to the UFC fighters. The UFC PI serves mole, possibility, very real possibility, and if they're serving mole, who knows how that is affecting the fighters? Who knows how that is affecting the fighters? So, now, without any further preamble, let's hear what Joe Pyfer has to say. In his own words. I don't want to stop him. I will try not to stop him again.
But for now, it still stings that I didn't get to fight. But the last thing I will address is, I don't care if it's offensive to you. I will never go back to that country. I did everything right. I slept in a tent.
And to say, again, I don't want to focus in on this too much, but when he says I will never go back to that country, I think it's because we can now prove that his stomach was assaulted by the food.
All this work to still get sick. Some people are saying it wasn't the food, saying I got altitude.
It was mole. You eat that. You go from Philadelphia, you go from New Jersey, right, to that, and you tell me, you fucking look me in the eyes and tell me your stomach ain't feeling some type of way. You ain't feeling some sort of Lupe Godinez way. So I don't accept that. I don't accept that at all. I don't accept people telling him that it wasn't the food. I don't accept that.
Sick. Some people are saying it wasn't the food, saying I got altitude sickness. I'm not a fucking geographic fucking, elevation fucking scientist, but
he's not a geographic elevation scientist. And he's not expected to be, mate. He's a cage fighter. He's not a geographic elevation scientist. He is a cage fighter. And there is no such thing as a geographic elevation scientist. There is absolutely no such thing at all as a geographic elevation scientist. I mean, if there was, it would be known as a topographer. If there was, it would be known as a topographer, all right? And that is someone who describes the surfaces and the feature of a place or a region, including its elevation, its topography, and its techniques for surveying, mapping, and remote sensing out the area. And who would expect Kelvin Gastelum, who would expect Joe Pyfer to be a topographer? Especially not a topographer of the food that's going on there. So I don't think it's fair that people say that. Anyway, let's really get into what he has to say here. I don't want to slow him down, all right? I'm not here to talk about topography. I'm here to talk about Joe Pyfer. I'm here to talk about Steve Erceg. Now let's get into this, because soon, very soon, we're going to start the video. We're going to begin actually breaking down why it was wrong to pick Steve Erceg, where I might have gotten wrong, but we're going to start very, very soon. Let's listen to Joe Pyfer. I don't want to get too much into this, but he's not meant to be a topographer. He's meant to be an MMA fighter.
Sick. Some people are saying it wasn't the food, saying I got altitude sickness. I'm not a fucking geographic fucking elevation fucking scientist, but I was told as long as I acclimated, which I did for 2 months, slept in a tent. And
2 months. Do you know what it's like sleeping in an elevation tent for 2 months? Do you understand how hard it is to sleep in an elevation tent for 2 months? Okay? Sleeping at altitude for 2 months, it can lead to having your entire body change. Your red blood cell production will go up. But you've got to do it slowly, and you've got to monitor your oxygen as you do it. It is very, very hard to do, but it will increase your oxygen carrying capacity, which is amazing, and then it will also increase your endurance. So he has spent 2 months locking in to make sure his endurance is up, to make sure that he is customized to being at elevation. And I'm sure that he did it slowly. I'm sure that he monitored his oxygen saturation. I'm sure that he listened to his body. You've got to pay attention, because you can get altitude sickness. You can get headache, you can get fatigue, you can get nausea, right? So if you're mixing elevation with mole, that is going to hurt you, okay? But as long as you adjust everything accordingly, you should be okay, And then of course you've got to be aware of the humidity, right? Because being at altitude can change humidity. But this is just something to think about, So interesting that he went down this path. I'm clicking on the video over here.
On the fucking floor, I did everything that I could to prepare. And if that's what altitude and elevation is, fuck that country. I will never fight there again.
I mean, would you? Would you, MMA Joey, the man who's just put this tweet up? You should be very careful with how you tweet, mate. But would you go out there again if you had been assaulted by the country's elevation, by the country's food, if you've seen other people assaulted by the country's judges? Because the judging on the card, let's not get into the judging on the card. There were some questionable decisions at UFC Mexico. And I think after we break down the kicks and the punches, and we really look at the card, and when we really look at the fight closely, I think after we do that, maybe then we can get into the judging of the card. That's what we'll do. We'll get through this. We'll get through this quickly. We'll cover this minute tweet very quickly. And then after that, we will look at the actual fight itself. And then after that, maybe we'll do some self-reflection. Perhaps. We might have time for it. Maybe I was right. Maybe I was wrong. Who knows? And then we'll get into it.
Shithole, not going back. Don't care if that's offensive to you.
Jesus.
You're not the one fighting. Suck my balls. Literally.
Oh.
But
that is nuts. So he must still be coming down.
Shithole, not going back. Don't care if that's offensive to you. You're not the one fighting. Suck my balls. Literally.
That's not good.
But
okay. That's Well, that's me. He shouldn't do that. He shouldn't do that. I don't know if I've shared this before, but I have a little philosophy on life. You know, you can always look at everything in life one of two ways. You can either look at the positive or you can look at the negative. And I always try and look at the positive. Try and put the positive out there. And to really sit back and to look at this fight. To look at this fight. And to think that maybe I might have picked wrong. Even though technically on the scorecards, and I don't want to bring the scorecards up again, but even though technically Steve Erceg did win, maybe I was wrong picking him. You know, maybe having big meaty hooks that do show the way that the fight, they do show the striking. Big meaty hooks with the big powerful overhands. Maybe they do win you the fight. Maybe Steve Erceg didn't do enough. You know, I don't want to keep looking at everything so closely, but maybe I was wrong to pick Steve Erceg because at the end of the day, you've got to be able to push hard and you've got to be able to push through, and it's not just point striking. You know, I thought it was a close fight. I thought Steve had won almost every single round. I could understand some people saying it was 2-2. Maybe it was a takedown in the last second. Maybe I should have looked at Steve Erceg a little bit closer in the Pantoja fight, where it was the takedown at the end of the Pantoja fight that really cost Steve Erceg the fight. Maybe Brandon Moreno is just one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time, and I was dumb and I was wrong for seeing it that way. And if only there were other people out there in the MMA community that were trying to guide me in the right direction. I mean, again, it was 84% of people said that Moreno was going to win this fight, and maybe they were right and maybe I was right. I mean, at the end of the day, who really wins a fight? You know, is it the guy that gets their hand raised that really wins the fight? Or is it whoever learnt the most? And what did Brandon Moreno learn from that fight? Honestly, what did Brandon Moreno actually take away from that fight? I mean, he was missing, he was whiffing, his head was out of the way. It was just, it was a joke, really. It was a joke. Like, just because Moreno has got, I don't know, some of the most wins in flyweight history, I should have taken that into account. You know, and if Pantoja can beat Moreno, I mean, that's just MMA math. But they say MMA math is a joke and you really shouldn't. But I think maybe it was the wrong call. It was a great fight from Brandon Moreno. It was close on the scorecards, but he was wrong. But he was wrong when it came to the actual kicks and the punches. It was good vibes. It was great vibes. It was a great card. It was fun. Maybe I'm biased towards Australians. You know, maybe I look at Australians and I see Ned Kelly, the great bushranger, who told the entire establishment to go and fuck themselves, and he went and he robbed banks and he shot at the police and he lived off the land by himself, and I thought there was a bit of that rebellious spirit inside Brandon Moreno. I thought Brandon Moreno had a bit of Ned Kelly in him. You know, Ned Kelly, the famous bushranger, all the way up to the 1880s. A brutal man, violent man, but a man none the same. You know, a man who inspired people from around the world to stand up and put on a metal face mask and fucking get after it. You know? But I guess Ned Kelly, he was born in Victoria. And Brandon Moreno was born in Perth. And Perth is a shithole. And Victoria was a place for savages. You know? And again, like, just because you could be a Ned Kelly and you can get around there and you can get into shootouts with the police. And I remember back in 1878, Ned Kelly was sharing a shed in New South Wales when Mr. Constable Fitzpatrick rocked up. Oi, Ned, you in there, mate? And Ned just rushed out at him with a revolver and started fucking shooting. And that's what I thought Brandon Moreno would do. I thought Brandon Moreno, at the start of the 4th round, or maybe the start of the 3rd round, you know, when he could feel that mole knocking at his back door. We're going to take a shit, mate? He would come out shooting as well. Shooting at Brandon Moreno to fucking get it done. Steve Erceg would get on there with that bit of that Ned Kelly fire. But he didn't. You know, he didn't. At the end of the day, he held it back a little bit. He was a little bit hesitant. And maybe that's what cost him the fight in the end. You know? I know I'm not the only one out there saying that it was a robbery. But maybe I was the wrong one to pick it that way. Maybe I was the wrong one to pick it that way. The question is, what's going to happen next for my picks? Am I going to look at myself and every single Australian? And am I always going to back the Aussie? You know, am I going to say to myself that Alexander Volkanovski, he's like 35 years old. He's coming off 2 horrible, savage knockouts. Diego Lopez is the next up-and-comer. And he swings and he goes in and he goes hard. You know, so am I just going to be blindly backing Alexander Volkanovski? Am I going to think that Alexander Volkanovski is going to go back to the Alexander Volkanovski of old? The one that used to grind people up against the cage? The one that was hated by the fans? The one that would push and shove and hold people down? The one that wrote the playbook on how to beat Jose Aldo? Do I think that Alexander Volkanovski's coming back? Or do I think I've got the new Alexander Volkanovski, the CKB Alexander Volkanovski, the one that likes to stay at range, do a bit of boxing and maybe get on the inside and always gets clipped on the chin? And this time, when he gets clipped on the chin by Diego Lopez, he's going to go to sleep. Is that the Alexander Volkanovski we're going to see? Is that the Alexander Volkanovski I'm going to accept? Or am I once again going to go, no, he's got the blood of Kelly in him. He's got the blood of Ned Kelly in him. You know? He will fight till the end. Steve Erceg didn't. Steve Erceg, the UFC fighter. He didn't. Steve Erceg, the UFC fighter. He did. I don't know what he had him. Steve Erceg, the UFC fighter. Steve Erceg, the UFC fighter. Steve Erceg. Steve Erceg, the UFC fighter. He didn't have that Alexander Volkanovski power in him, you know? He didn't have that in him, and I don't know why. I don't know why he didn't have that in him. There's something missing about the fire. There's something about him. Because he's got Croatian heritage. Steve Erceg isn't really Australian. He's half Croatian. He's got a Croatian background. And Croatians always lay down the arms. The Croatians join NATO. The Croatians join EU. Croatia gave up on Yugoslavia and Serbia. And Steve Erceg, who's half Italian and half Croatian, was never, ever going to beat Brandon Moreno. He was never going to beat Brandon Moreno. How could someone with Croatian, what have Croatians ever done in the UFC? There's never been a single successful Croatian fighter in the UFC. And he's from Perth. I mean, someone with Perth background and Croatian and Italian. I mean, the Italians gave up. They just gave up in World War II. The Croatians, they just allowed themselves to be trampled by NATO. They gave up on Yugoslavia. I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot for thinking that Steve Erceg would ever beat Brandon Moreno. That was a dumb decision. And I'm distraught at myself. Because, well, I mean, you could sit here and you could say Croatian UFC fighters. And it's almost like Indians, you know? Like, what have the Croatians really done, ever? Like, yeah, there was Crow Cop, but I mean, in the UFC, what was he? I mean, he was just a rising guy. Really? He was a rising guy, and he's one of the best, but he's a rising guy. And then Stipe Miocic, look at him in his last performance, gave up entirely. I mean, really? You've got Crow Cop, who has to be good in Pride, against the Japanese. Enough said. There's a reason they have Pride and Ryzen, and they hate coming over to the UFC. There's a reason. I allow my own biases and my own racial glasses, my own racial sunglasses, because I don't look at the world like people like MMA Joey do. I don't put people into boxes, you know? I look at everyone equally and the same. And I start the same and I end the same, and that's how I analyze fights. And when I see Erceg, I see him as just another kid from Australia trying to have a go. But if I was to actually analyze him and look at him and really look at the whole situation, you know, from a 100-mile view from the top, you know, from a 1,000-mile view from the top. Let's say I was an aeroplane flying at 100,000 feet through the air, looking down at my picks for UFC Mexico. Then I should have seen that the UFC are doing everything they can to help support UFC in Mexico at the PI, providing the food to the athletes and therefore poisoning the athletes. And I should have not looked at the world the way that we looked at the world through the 90s. I should be more liberal. I should be more leftist. I should be more woke. And I should look at the world through the lenses of the DEI progressive agenda and start to see everyone for what they are. And then I would have seen that Steve Erceg was half Italian and half Croatian. A failed state of the EU propaganda machine that turned against Yugoslavia. And that's the same way that he turned against this fight. And even though he might have thrown more strikes, and I hate to bring up the stats, and I'm going to stop. This will be one of the last times that I bring up the stats. But even though Steve Erceg threw more shots, really what were they? Really what were they? They were like the kind of shots that the Croatians fired in all of their wars. Yeah, they might have thrown more, but really, how are they landing? How much actual damage is being put on each one? And I think now that we really understand what is going on with Steve Erceg in this fight, it's insane that we need to add this to the list. But as we begin the video, as we start the video, as we get into actually watching the fight, as we really begin the video and see it and watch it and get into the actual kicks and the punches, we need to realize that he is tainted with Croatian blood. And this is really not a timeline of how Steve Erceg lost, but a timeline of how I should have seen that Steve was destined to lose. This is a timeline of how I should have seen that Steve Erceg was destined to lose. And I was wrong. And I was wrong. Let's really lock this down. And all of this was there going into the fight. We should have known about it. Lock the background, Dougie. We should have known all of this going into the fight. You know? Australian pay-per-views are dog shit. There was a greased up Mexican. The cameramen were against us. The UFC announced Noche. London sucked, so of course they were going to favour Moreno. UFC PI was serving Mole. He's tainted with Croatian blood. He was destined to lose. And I was wrong for picking Steve Erceg. I was wrong for picking Steve Erceg. And now when we start this video and we get into it, and now that we have gotten everything sort of set up properly, now we can actually, we can really look at the fight. We can go all the way back to the start of the fight. We can go all the way back to the start of the fight, all the way back to round one, right when they're about to touch gloves, when the whole crowd is there, everyone's hyped and amped. There's Brandon Moreno looking healthy, not worried about the food at all. And these two are about to start throwing the kicks and the punches. And as we really get into this and start to look at every single little detail, now that the stage has been set, it's not really fair to say that it was a robbery, because you can't just throw little Croatian pitter-patter punches and kicks. You've actually got to get in there. You've got to get in there, if you are this close. And not only that, he was rushed to the title as well. Oh, it's all coming to me now. It's not just that. Steve Erceg was rushed to the title as well. I mean, his fourth fight in the UFC. His fourth fight in the UFC. It was rushed. He was rushed to the title. He should never even, if I sit here and I make videos and I talk about how Jamal Hill is maybe one of the most fraud-checked champions that has ever existed, because Jamal Hill was 7th when he fought Glover Teixeira for the title. And ever since then, he's done nothing but lose. And we're about to see Jamal Hill end up right back at number 7th. So if I'm going to sit here and talk shit about Jamal Hill and how he was never really a champion, and people, they want to overlook that. They want to overlook that a lot, but I don't overlook that. I don't overlook those little details. And if you're going to do that, then you need to talk about Steve Erceg as well. And Steve Erceg was rushed to the title, and he maybe, perhaps, it's possible to say, never should have been in the top 3. He never should have been in the top 3. And instead of seeing that he was tainted with Croatian blood, and instead of seeing that he never should have been in the top 3, instead I was blinded by seeing just another young Australian man have a crack. And that might have set me up for failure. That might have been one of the few reasons why I might have been wrong when it comes to Steve Erceg in the UFC maybe getting that win. Just because he got his debut against David Dvorak all the way back in look at that, it'd be 2023. And even then it was late notice. He replaced Matt Schnell, he did. I remember it. He replaced Matt Schnell, he did. And it was an upset as well. It got him the performance of the night, but it was a little bit too much too soon. Very Raul Rosas Jr.-esque. Instead, that fight against Matt Schnell was rescheduled. March of 2024 it was. Rescheduled for March of 2024. Fight night. Now, Erceg, he won that fight via knockout. And I did say in my video, only the best of the best knock out Matt Schnell. Maybe I need to look at myself for that one too. Maybe that wasn't the right thing to say. Matt Schnell, he's been KO'd a couple of times. Maybe Erceg got lucky. And maybe it's that kind of luck that went into Steve Erceg when he KOs Matt Schnell all the way back then in 2023. When you have that kind of luck to KO Matt Schnell, you think that your shots are actually landing with power. So there you are, in front of Brandon Moreno. Fucking jab, jab, teep, teep, kick, kick. And you see the score count. It's racking up, 1 strike, 2 strike, 3 strike, 4 strikes, 5 strikes, 6 strikes. These strikes are racking up bit by bit by bit by bit. And you can go back to your corner, and your corner's going, how's the gut? How was the mole last night? You're going, yeah, it's a bit bubbly, but I think we'll get through this. You remember all the way back to 2023 when you fought Matt Schnell, and you go, no, I can do this. All I have to do is just keep patting away at Brandon Moreno, and eventually I'll be able to get the finish. And this is how these things happen, you know? This is how fuck-ups like this happen. And I should have seen that coming, and it's on me, and it's my fault, and I was wrong for not seeing that. I was wrong for not seeing that. I did the wrong thing. You know, and then when you have the Alexandre Pantoja fight, UFC 301. Close fight. And I think this is probably where I get a little bit confused in my own head. I get a little bit blindsided about what's going on here. Because I see the Pantoja fight, and Pantoja is nobody's fool. He's fought everyone in the division. You know, the people that Pantoja has fought in the division is insane. Like, just thinking back to some of the fights that he has had, right? He's fought Davidson Figueiredo. He's fought Matt Schnell himself. He's fought Askar Askarov, Brandon Royval, Alex Perez. He's fought them all. Dustin Ortiz. People forget, man. People forget. You know, he fought Neil Seery all the way back in the day. But there he is. He's in there with that fight at UFC 301, which is a brutal fight, mate. Brutal fight in 2024, 301, again in Brazil. And once again, Steve Erceg has got to go into enemy territory and fight not just the man in front of him, but the judges. And he's leaning on the Matt Schnell lockout, but it's only his 4th fight in the UFC, so he's a little uppity. He's got a little bit too much confidence. There's a little bit too much confidence in him. It's not good, mate. You can't have that much confidence, you know? When you're in there against Alexandre Pantoja, you got to be locked in. You got to be locked in. You got to be ready to go. You got to have fire coming at you. Yeah? And instead, he doesn't. Instead, he throws a takedown in the last round. All of these little reasons why go into why I might have been a little bit wrong when I picked him to fight. I shouldn't have done that. I should have locked in. I should have known that all of these things were going against him, and I'm the fool and I'm the idiot. And now that all that's been done, now we can watch this fight, we can break it down frame by frame, and we can see exactly how and why I picked it wrong, and we can see the shots, and it's a bloody shame. It's a bloody shame. But if I sit now, we can start the video. And we can see where Steve Erceg lost this fight. We can finally get into it now. And we can lock in, and all of us together can now watch this video and see Steve Erceg actually lose this fight frame by frame. So, opening straight away, we have them here. Bladed stance, right? Steve Erceg, he's thinking about Matt Schnell. He knows that fight is in his head. He's locked in here, and you can see, once again, the cameraman is showing us from behind Brandon Moreno, which gives us the idea and the thoughts